What is the most memorable NSW thing that happened in high school? 2 sophomores got suspended for recording themselves freaking in the distance learning classroom. Some online classes required video cameras for lectures. They used that and recorded an adult tape. Distance learning sounds like a regular class, but the board is really far away. Some guy was caught masturbating in the girls' bathroom. Imagine our surprise when another was caught soon after. After that, they had a teacher stand outside the bathroom during lunch and had it locked during class so they'd need to go the staff room instead. Felt bad for the girls. My math teacher told us if we all got A's and B's on our test, he'd dye his hair green and rollerblade down the hallway. We all passed, and sure enough, he showed up to school with green hair the following week. During class transitions he was out rollerblading down the hall when he thought it would be funny to mess with a jokester student. So he grabbed him and tried to push him in the girls' bathroom as a joke, and another student trying to help ran up behind them and shut the door. The tip of my teacher's pinky finger was near the hinges, and it was sliced off. Blood was everywhere and the tip of his finger was just lying there in the floor. To make matters worse, they sent the severed finger to the wrong hospital, but he had good spirits when he came back, even naming the finger Quasimodo. I was willing to take the green hair and rollerblading as memorable. The pinky bit was unexpected. With no warning at all, a girl in my class threw up a stomach full of blood all over her desk and books. The teacher went pale and stared at her. She just softly said sorry. The teacher just pointed to the door and just said go to the nurse. Then pointed to the girl next to her and said you go with her. I don't remember what was wrong with her, but she ended up missing about 2 months of school after that. She recovered and is fine now. I love that throwing up blood gets the same reaction as a nosebleed. A freshman kid at our high school has been collecting pictures of naked buttholes from students. So far he has 37. He got them from other people or getting them himself. The only reason I found out was because the dude was sitting at a table I was at and had placed his phone flat on the table. He then proceeded to open up his private pictures and snap. He now has 38. He now has 39, but more people are finding out, so someone might tell a teacher or staff member. I'm sorry to announce, but he has decided to remove all of the pictures because someone tried to blackmail him. What the frick is with collecting butthole pictures? This is the first time I've heard of this hobby. The in-school suspension supervisor got fired and may be arrested for fricking one of the students. She was 15. Who hires a 15-year-old as a supervisor? In PE, a girl pulled my pants down while I was playing volleyball as the only guy with a bunch of girls. She meant to just get my shorts but accidentally got underwear too, so at least 10 girls saw my butt and or dong. We had a guy who was on crutches and standing in study hall. Someone pantsed him, boxers and all, and obviously he couldn't pull them up himself or walk somewhere to sit down, so he just stood there, dong out, until the female teacher came to pull them up for him. A kid was found dead by his mom. He'd skipped school and hung himself in his closet. By all accounts he was a healthy, happy teenager with lots of friends, and no one could say that they saw this coming. There was a memorial assembly at school and speeches about suicide awareness and all that. I only knew him by name, but I think for everyone it was a reality check since we were all so blindsided by it. A few days later, mom confesses she didn't come home and find that he'd committed suicide. Well, sorta. What had actually happened was he discovered autoerotic asphyxiation and died accidentally. As is frequently the case, when mom discovered his body that morning, she dressed him and cleaned up the scene so as to hide why he died. After a few days, she realized that this lie was too much and she revealed the truth. As a result, we all had to take a mini class on the dangers of autoerotic asphyxiation, which was a very bizarre thing for a 14-year-old to learn about. Alluring South African physics teacher was caught getting fellatio from Australian biology teacher. Both female, so our teacher was pregnant at the time. Another school in our district had an orgy and filmed it in the school bathroom. I put quotations around that because it was like 7 guys to 2 girls. Worst part was that they were barefoot in the men's bathroom. Almost threw up seeing that. I believe a gender imbalance of that magnitude makes it a gangbang. Computer teacher opened whitehouse.com on the projector during a follow-along class. This was in the late 90s when that site was P-based. I mean the regular White House was pretty pee-based in the 90s too. So this didn't actually happen at high school, but it is still relevant. About 2 weeks before we graduated, I decided to throw a field party on a farm as a graduation party. I was expecting 30 or 40 people, but lo and behold well over 100 showed up. I wasn't worried about any police or whatever, so we all just had a great time, drinking way too much and just goofing off. Anyway, there was this one girl that was ostracized from most our graduating class. She had the tendency to make physical shaming assault claims that were obviously false, as in, saying this guy groped her at ABC's party, but the dude wasn't there or she didn't show either, needlessly starting fights, and had a very grating personality. Whatever. I made it very clear to people that I didn't want her on the property because I didn't want any trouble to start. Well, guess who shows up? That chick. So we were all pretty liquored up and I just told her to have fun and don't cause trouble. Within 15 minutes she had downed way too much booze and was picking fights with several people. I told one of the DDs to take her butt home. All good, right? Wrong. I went and bumped uglies with a friend for a couple hours and came back. The fire's dying down. Only about 30 people are left and most of those were crashing in their cars or in tents. Then I hear a groan at the edge of the woods about 30 feet away. This area was at the back of a field and on 3 sides were woods. Well, frick. I walk over to see, guess who? That girl I thought had gone home hours before. The person that I tasked with taking her home later told me she got violent in the car before they left and made her get out. Anyway, I walk over and this chick is wallowing around in half-rotten leaves and sticks, just freaking out. She has soiled herself in every way imaginable. Vomit, crap, pee, the glorious trifecta. Turns out she had taken a bunch of benzos before coming and then drank, which is a big no-no as it can cause fatal respiratory depression. So me and a friend are wondering how the heck we're going to get her home and she starts accusing me of crapping in her pants while she was passed out. I crap you not. The smell was rancid and made my friend throw up. To wrap it up, I calmed her down, gave her some sweatpants, called a friend I knew would be awake and sober at 4 AM, and paid them to come get her and take her home. That turned what was a fun end to an awesome graduation party into a shitshow. Pun intended. Senior trip, we went to a camp for a few days. It was mostly normal, except for the orgy cabin. There was a set time for it to happen, and guys apparently passed around names on slips of which girls they were claiming. Best part is it got discovered by the principal himself. Not sure what happened to the students involved, but there were memes for the rest of the year with the principal's face pasted on top of Thanos. This is a different kind of NSW, probably, but once a freshman shat all over a bathroom stall and wrote some other kid's name on the wall to try and frame him, I guess. Well, that kid wasn't even present that day, so the culprit was caught pretty quickly and had to transfer out. The dean had sat all the boys in the school, freshmen and sophomores together and then juniors and seniors together, in our conference room and showed them the stall to try and scare a confession out of them. I guess it worked. I only know this because my husband, BF at the time, was in the conference room and almost got in trouble for this mess because he thought it was hilarious and couldn't stop laughing at the dean's poop presentation. He still, to this day, doesn't know what the poor man expected. To just show a bunch of teenage boys a poopy slideshow? During psychology class, this girl had her phone between her skirt and I guess every time she got a text or something, it would vibrate and she would kinda squirm. It was interesting to watch since I was across from her. Science teacher accidentally brushed a chick's boob a tad when trying to touch her shoulder. She did pretty well in that class without needing to do all the work. Female volleyball coach of men's volleyball. She let us have an end of season party at her place. One of the guys on the team spent the night there and banged her. Guarantee that was her plan to get you guys there all along. A small group of students at my high school was convinced aliens were observing us because a certain cornfield near the football field would have crop circles every year. It was flattened out patches from where kids would sneak off to frick during football games. 2 of our married gym teachers got caught fricking in the weight room after school. 1 male and 1 female teacher. They weren't married to each other. Yeah, 2 employees were caught doing that in the company gym where I used to work. One was named Steele, until she divorced not long after. For some reason, and the joke going around was we should go to the gym and pump steel. 2002, teacher was unzipped and giving a lecture. Valedictorian had to tell him that his balls were showing. Bumblebee tuna. Bumblebee tuna. Senior prank gone wrong. Every once in a while the school Olympic-sized pool needed to be chlorine-killed for cleanliness, and it was unusable for a few hours until the chlorine adequately dispersed. This is important. Senior prank time rolls around and a bunch of the seniors decide to buy pickup truckloads of dry ice to dump in the pool to mist up the school. Well, these geniuses accidentally timed it with chlorination schedule of the pool and blanketed the whole school with chlorine gas. It was shut down for a week. Literally NSW. This is by far the funniest one here. 8th grade girl sucked 11th grader's dong in the boys' bathroom. Both got suspended. Then about 2 months later they both got caught fricking in the back stairwell. Both are now expelled. Senior year. Biology IB2. The teacher is kinda chaotic and isn't very structured. Late a lot. It's his first class of the day. Sorta lets us do our work at our pace. So he was late one morning and we were all just sitting and chatting waiting for him. We got on the topic of piercings and one girl said she recently got one of her nipples pierced. We were confused why she only did one, and then she showed us. In class, at her desk she just lifted her shirt and bra to show us her single pierced nipple. It took me a second to realize what just happened. Then me and my buddy high-fived or something IDK. Same thing happened to me once, but not in high school. Me and a buddy bumped into an old high school friend after a night of drinking in the center of downtown. This friend just blurts out, "I got my nipples pierced," and outside in the middle of downtown, just lifts her shirt and bra and shows us her tee. Same exact reaction. Ha, cool. Hops on bus home. Wait a minute. Not so much in a good way. My senior English teacher decided it'd be a good idea to have us all talk about significant events in our life, or something like that. Not sure of the exact phrasing. Lots and lots of debaucheries, and a few suicide attempts, and a kid finding his dead parents. Basically just 2 days of extremely graphic and emotional descriptions of the worst things that ever happened to a class of 20 teenagers. On the bright side, the teacher convinced one of the debauchery victims to identify the person who did it, and he's still in jail. The teacher clarified after the first two that he didn't expect it to be so negative, but we just kinda kept going with that trend. A few people didn't present, and that was okay too. Where the heck did you study, man? A girl committed suicide by hanging herself in our gym from the bleachers. Not sure what time she did that, but it was the biggest news that circulated the school. Anna Karenina was removed from our curriculum for 4 years when a senior jumped in front of the train next to the school. My senior year, a girl accused a male teacher of trying to coerce her into giving him nude pictures. According to her story, he had held her behind class and told her if she didn't he was going to fail her and that she wouldn't graduate on time. The teacher was fired instantly, but it was never taken to criminal or civil court. The vast majority of my graduating class did not believe the girl because she was known for spreading false rumors. Her story gradually changed the more people asked her about it, and the teacher was actually well liked by the majority of the students. Was the teacher brought back? Did she get punished in any way? Girl literally got fricked through a locker room wall when she tried to take on the whole hockey team at once. And I'm not talking glory hole style. It was more like Kool-Aid Man. Oh yeah. A sophomore shot himself and his mom ran into the high school screaming after finding him, trying to find her daughter to break the news. The school resource officer stopped her in the foyer, but we could see everything from the cafeteria. She was covered in blood. He didn't kill himself at school. Mom came to school from their home, but she hadn't changed clothes. Freaking brutal. Imagine the mother in total shock, covered in blood. A kid was caught jerking it to videos of penguins during biology class. He was then banned from using the school computers and wearing sweatpants. 2 of my classmates, a hot girl and an ugly dude, with a big dong so I've heard, go into the school bathroom and frick. Somehow a picture of it is leaked in the Facebook class group chat. The dude left our class right after that. When I was a senior, there was someone who was crapping in brown paper bags and leaving them in the stairwells on the landings. My high school at the time had around 5,000 students, so the stairs were always huge clusterfucks, and now you have a bunch of people stepping on human crap and tracking that all over on their shoes. The school tried to figure it out by having teachers stand in the staircases, but the person doing it started going out in the middle of class to deposit his brown bag turd, and it started driving the admins crazy. Eventually he was caught. Turns out it was a junior year kid who was on the football team and he was expelled. Back in the late 1970s, we had an inter-school streaking league. 5 different high schools in the area fielded teams of streakers and awarded points for number of participants, number of minutes for the streak, and style points for location, silliness, playfulness, and general audacity, subtracting points for number of arrests. The scores were published weekly in the school newspapers. My high school won handily. For one streak, about 15 of us started at the school, a block to the local Lions restaurant, and streaked inside between the front and back entrances, waited at the corner of the main street through town for the light to change, crossed the street and streaked through the Wendy's, and then retraced our steps. Another had us streaking the local police department. One of our team members was the night desk sergeant's daughter, so we had inside help. The league went on for about 6 weeks until the school district put pressure on the principals to shut it down. But for at least a couple years after, our school's trophy case held an unmarked running trophy with a strategically placed fig leaf on the runner. The frick. A girl, 13-15, sent a Snapchat out to several people of her naked with only images covering her. We were on a class trip and they locked us all in our rooms until the staff and police sorted it out. So to add a bit more to the story and clear a few things up, the cops determined it wasn't CP, so she did not get arrested for producing and distribute CP. I can't remember what happened after that to her, however I believe the teachers either called her parents up and they got her, or they gave her a good talking to, got all the documentation in order, and let her enjoy the rest of the trip. I do think it was a good call on them in case there was a way someone got the images off the pic and it got out. They would at least have documentation on the matter for the police. I was 18 at the time, so this could have ended bad for me. We were reciting our own poetry for our 11th grade English class. Most of it was just floofy bulls. However, a jock in class got up and began reciting his poem. It started off slow, but it became clearer and clearer that he was talking about how he would go back in time and deflower our English teacher. He kept glancing back and forth between the teacher and the paper in his hands, ignoring the class entirely. Every face in the room was bright red. The teacher was a deep red and was crying with uncomfortable laughter. I will never forget the final line. Something like, "Until I flood your eager, quivering crevices with my genetic riches." The dude was not that bright, so I am pretty sure the only thing he spent the night with was a thesaurus. Referring to sperm as genetic riches is actually genius. I'm a childhood expat who went back to rural Illinois at the age of 14. I witnessed some shenanigans there. One time, we were all sitting around a bonfire, and a girl in the group decided to put on a show with a cigarette. She masturbated with a cigarette in front of everyone. She then took it one step further. She used an empty whiskey bottle to masturbate in front of us. None of us knew what to say or do in response to that, so we just let her do her thing. I think we all just felt bad for her. That was the part that was most memorable for me. I'm trying to imagine masturbation with a cigarette and it just ain't adding up. We were on a field trip to an amusement park for marching band. A bus from an all-boys Catholic middle school pulled up beside ours. My friend dared me to flash my boobs and I wasn't one to back down from a dare. So I waited until most of the boys were looking away. Only one nerdy little boy was looking in our direction. So I did it. His mouth dropped wide open with surprise as he quickly motioned for the other boys to come have a look. They moved so quickly from one side of the bus to the other that I actually thought it might tip over. Seriously, the whole bus rocked to one side, but they were too late. TLDR. Flashed a nerdy middle schooler and almost tipped over a school bus. God was on his side that day. My physics teacher was an odd duck. Zany and eccentric like a lot of science teachers, but also overtly xenophobic. 2 occurrences I remember well. First, during a class project, he pointed at a Thai girl Vietnamese guy, and Cambodian guy, and said alright, all these Chinese kids in one group. There was a shocked silence but nothing really came of it. The second one was while studying the concept of tension. He used a hanging example and asked the only black kid in the whole class his weight to be used as the example for us to measure the amount of tension that would be in the rope if he were to be hanged. The black kid was also the assistant principal's adopted son, which he must have known, and he got fired. There was a full-time math teacher at my high school that subbed for our calculus class one day. He was talking about a graph and I believe trying to say bigger and negative at the same time. He ended up with an amalgamation of those words that had everyone in the class was shocked and uncomfortably quiet, looking around the room to check with the black students. The very first time I had frickied, the condom broke, and after the deed was done my girlfriend was standing next to the bed stuffing 2 fingers inside of her as far as she could to try and scoop CM out of herself. It was terrifying at the time. Hilarious mental picture now. Holy crap, that's a rough first time. Someone suction cupped a giant rubber dragon corn cob to the wall above the senior lockers. No one could get it down for weeks. It had its own social media account. Shows dedication to the prank. These things ain't cheap. In freshman year, a girl airdropped her friend's nudes to every single person at our school. Yeah, that turned into quite the event after. The girl who sent out the nudes was expelled and had to register as a diddler. The girl who the nudes were off stage at my school, she got a little bit of flack but no one really talks about it now. In NL we have a fried snack called a fricandle. It's basically a floppy stick of meat, like maybe 15 cm, that you keep frozen until you deep fry it. One of the girls in my school, allegedly, used one of these frozen sticks to do her thing. Well, the thing is that fricandles that are not yet fried are very soft. So when the frozen fricandle got inside her, it warmed up and defrosted. Because not fried fricandle is soft, it broke off inside her. She had to go to hospital to get the piece of meat removed. This is a fairly common rumor that goes around in schools. When I was in public school it was the unpopular girl and a hot dog. It definitely wasn't true at my school. Might have been at yours. Who knows? Scoops girl. Apparently she took pics of herself with an ice cream scoop in her vajayjay and it got circulated. Then an ice cream place opened in town called Scoop Me. I like to think they were related. She was a part of the marketing department. Guy on the football team would bust into the locker room and demonstrate that he could tie his flaccid dong into a knot. He went on to play in the NFL. What was his name? A senior girl, also a well-known lacrosse player and all-around snarky bee, had a physical rendezvous with a freshman football player from the same high school at the local park and ride one morning. By lunch word had gotten around the whole school. When they walked into the cafeteria the whole crowd erupted in applause and cheering. From that day forward she was known as Park and Ride and the guy faded into obscurity. If this was worded any differently I bet someone would post this on our Thathapand. During a school dance the one girl with notoriously large breasts, like unreasonably so, was dancing to Cotton Eye Joe and her shirt finally gave up and her ginormous breasts popped out. I was one of the many guys that witnessed it. It was glorious. It's all thanks to Cotton Eye Joe. I saw titties a long time ago. They were so big with no room to grow. Thank God for that shirt and Cotton Eye Joe. Getting off in the back of the biology lab. I would meet my husband in biology in college. Maybe it's something about science. Or the thrill of the possibility of getting caught. Redditors who rode the bus to and from school. What was your most memorable moment on the school bus? When some goth kids wrote Pig B on the back of my book bag. I walked around middle school that entire day without knowing. What they didn't realize is I couldn't afford a new book bag. I had to have someone draw a puppy over it. I was in 5th grade going home from school. One of the kids in the year below me decided once he get off the bus that it would be a great idea to moon all the kids still on the bus. Pulled his pants down too far and everyone got an eyeful of his junk, including the bus driver. He got in big trouble with the school and got teased for ages after that. In kindergarten some kid on the bus pulled out his dong to show me. I went straight to the bus driver and told her tearfully he showed me his dong, no way she was getting paid enough for that crap. The middle schoolers would always ride the bus at the same time as the high schoolers did in the mornings. Second day of 8th grade and 2 high schoolers in the back had brought their guitars on the bus with them and played the entire way. Anyways, here's Wonderwall. In grade school, a girl with really long hair was sitting next to an open window and her hair got snagged by a tree limb. Ripped a chunk of scalp off her head about the size of a tennis ball. For those wondering, doctors let it heal up and she had surgery later to stretch her scalp to cover it. It ended up looking like a T-scar on the top right corner of her head. You'd never notice it unless she parted her hair to show you. Also, someone later that day ended up finding the chunk of her scalp and hair still tangled on the tree branch, but it was well after she went to the hospital so they didn't try to sew it back on. Jesus, she's really lucky the force didn't snap get neck. One time my friend pushed me out of the seat and I fell and faceplanted on a guy's dong. I'm a girl. Fell. The bus was always the perfect time to play the dong game, where each person took turns saying the word dong progressively louder. There was always that one guy who just didn't give a frick and would shout doong at the top of his lungs. This game was common in the school auditorium and the library. I went back to my old high school on work business recently and kids were still doing that. It took a lot of effort not to shout back. This is my most memorable moment, period. I had drank lots of coffee the night before trying to stay awake and study for a test. As I got on my bus the next morning, the chutes start to hit me. But this was nothing I had ever experienced before. 10 minutes into my 50-minute bus ride, I'm starting to sweat, then panic. I try making eye contact with my bus driver through that front mirror. Maybe he'll see my distress. Maybe he'll pull over and I can release my stink at Burger King. I ended up squatting over my paper lunch bag and taking a massive dump in it, all while sobbing and staring at the back of a girl who sat in the seat in front of me. Afterward, I was so flustered I just buckled the bag next to me for the rest of the ride. It was a low point in my life. A few months later, I did it again. Frick. My bus caught fire. There was a lot of smoke coming out from underneath but the driver didn't believe us and kept driving. The next time the bus slowed down, a kid who had helped with the bus evacuation drill a week earlier opened the door and jumped out. Once the driver stopped, the kid started getting everyone out by himself until the driver realized we weren't just being crappy and started helping. We got a new driver after that. My 2 dogs running in front of the bus after school. The bus driver slammed the brakes and the dogs obliviously missed getting hit by inches. A much happier ending than all the other bus stories involving dogs that I've read so far. Playing red light, game where you split the bus in 2. One team defends the red emergency light by the rear exit, other tries to touch it. Bus driver was in on it, would floor it and then slam on the brakes. You had kids flying 4 or 5 rows in the air. BC we would climb seats to get to the light. One kid got picked up and thrown into a window by senior and broke it. We literally beat the crap out of each other for the 30 minutes ride home. But the bus driver was like frick it and drove crazy taxi style and took it to another level. To say that I wish I rode your bus to school is an understatement. Some guy smoked herb on my bus. I was stupid and told my mom. She called the school. I got called into the vice principal's office, and I was a goody two shoes nobody. That never happened to me. A girl from my bus was in the office doing work. There were office helper periods sometimes. She would have totally let the guy know it was me who squealed. So I lied and said I didn't know who it was. You got lucky if that was high school. The driveway to our elementary school had, and still has, a sewer drain that causes the driveway to dip a little. My favorite times on the bus were asking the bus driver to speed a little over the dip, so us kids in the back could get a sensation of weightlessness. There was also the time where we had a substitute bus driver, also in elementary school, who almost took us to the wrong school. Got over the train tracks. We didn't go over the tracks to get to school. When we pointed it out to her, had to turn into a parking lot and head back to the correct school, causing us to be like 10 minutes late or something. In middle school there wasn't enough space for everyone to sit down. One of the teachers got my crush, who was sitting beside me, to sit on my lap, so another kid could sit beside us. Single greatest bus ride of my life. Kid sticks his arm out the window while holding a ball of aluminum foil. calls the shot and sinks the ball in a trash can as we drive by. Was amazing. We erupted. A dude returned from placement in alternative school, lit a cigarette and answered a phone call during which he was trying to sell a pistol. I didn't see him again after that week. So many fun stories. Last day before winter break, Friday, somebody throws a paper crumbled into a ball. Someone throws another and another and another. Within 3 minutes you could barely see the front of the bus. Literally everybody is throwing paper balls and laughing. Girls, boys, nerds, band kids, good kids, bad kids, seniors through freshmen. Hilarious and crazy. Phil rolled down the window and spit a gobstopper at a car. Car proceeds to cut the bus off in traffic. Stop the bus. Come on the bus and almost physically attack Phil. Cops came for that one and actually took Phil. Goddamn Phil. For a while, I was the paper airplane baron on the bus. I would make other kids paper airplanes as long as they gave me a piece of paper. I was like origami king in middle school. People paid me for paper finger claws and fortune tellers. When I was in kindergarten and elementary school, I would go on the floor and slide under people's seats on the bus and scare them. My elementary school bus got egged one afternoon. The bus driver was a sweet old man who always wore one of those old flat caps and never had any problems until then. When the bus got egged, he slammed on the brakes and jumped off and chased the kids as screamed and threw his hat. One of the kids that threw the eggs ended up running and leaving his bike behind. If I remember right, the driver took it and put it on the bus and then went on with the rest of his route. 5th grade, a student put a rubber band around his neck and his brother snapped it. I didn't see it happen, just saw the kid turning blue in the face, rolling around on the ground. The bus driver took us back to school, where an ambulance met us. This one time we got some chicks in a convertible to flash us by holding up a sign at the window saying show us your tea. One time set the fricking scene for years of attempts. The school bully was making fun of my friend because my friend's mom had severe MS while in middle school. My friend pinned him down and I beat him with my trumpet case. That was cathartic. Band geeks don't often get to beat the pee out of someone. A bully stopped me from getting off the bus at my street by blocking the way. I was at the back of the bus then. Also, I was very small then, first year of school, so I can't compete yelling out to the bus driver in the middle of the kids hype fest. Finally the bus driver realized I was still in the bus after full lap and sent me home afterwards. On the following year, I got a bike to ride to school, which is awesome. Should have just stabbed the kid with a pen. My sister was getting pestered by our cousin, so she pulled out a hairbrush and put the backside across his face. The driver, my great uncle at the time, looked in the large rear view mirror and hollered all the way to the back. It was a silent ride home from there. My cousin knew it was coming. This was early, mid-90s. We used to ride crappy old buses along an unsealed road. There was a particularly steep hill and one day the bus just couldn't make it, so the bus driver made everyone get out and help push it up the hill. My high school bus was nuts, specifically due to the people who sat in back. It wasn't the best area and there was a large gang influence. The back of the buses were usually of that element. It's understandably unbelievable, but the lady who drove it was super chill, like letting us play rap music over the speakers, knew a bus, and barely protesting when we'd smoke weed or cigs. I recall some putting her foot down, but a fair amount of those present would do it anyways and the rest would just follow. It got out of hand quickly, but it was definitely memorable. I mean, who the frick gets to smoke weed on a public school bus with their friends while the driver is blasting the music of your choice? One time riding home, somebody threw an orange at this black pickup driving the other way and it splattered all over the windshield. Lady flipped around, had the bus driver pull over and got on to find the culprit. Nobody talked and the bus driver was like, meh, can't control em. Didn't see who. Sorry, the juvenile delinquent within still thinks it's funny that we got away with it, but I feel bad. 2. Lady was just minding her own business, undeserving of such senseless vandalism. When we stopped to pick up a 2nd and 3rd grader, as most kids that live in the country, their parents had left them to get on the bus by themselves as they had to get to work. Well, these kids had a new puppy, so no one was watching the puppy. Like all puppies, it wanted to stick by its new owners at all times. It chased the kids onto the bus, The bus driver noticed the puppy and, trying to be careful, decided to drive off. We stopped shortly after leaving. Me being the oldest kid, she called me to the front of the bus. She told me that she thinks that she ran over the puppy. She told me to go check. I was 12. I went outside and sure enough, she had ran its head over. Its eyes had popped out of its skull and was hanging by the nerves, kind of like a fricked up cartoon when their eyes bug out. She had me move the dead puppy to the side of the road so no one else ran it over, all while the kids bawled their eyes out as their bus driver killed their new puppy. Getting dry humped by Jeanette. She had no panties on, so not quite dry. Sitting there on my knee rocking back and forward. She got off at the stop before mine and my jeans were damp AF. I never washed them again. She got off at the stop before mine. One time it was really foggy and we were on the way to school. Through the fog we see this shape and it's a tractor coming at us at full speed on the wrong side of the road. We swerved into a ditch as the tractor sped by. Another time the bus was an hour late or so because it got stuck in a snow drift before my stop. I went home before it even showed up. Same bus almost drove off a hill. Same bus wrecked on said hill. Bus driver got fired for always being drunk. 1. I witnessed a girl eat ramen noodles straight out the package. No water or anything. Then she chugged the powder like it was a drink. She did this in the morning for breakfast and in the afternoon for a snack. It was disgusting for me to witness. 2. I also witnessed a kid call the bus driver a freaking pea. Straight to their face. I was in 3rd grade at the time. It was eye-opening. The driver had a new bus that was a manual. On the way home we were going up a steep hill and the driver tried to make the shift to 2nd. After a good long grind and the bus stopped and it started rolling backwards and someone yelled, "We are all going to die." The bus stopped. She managed first and drove 1/4 mile up the hill in 1st gear. A kid threw a PB&J through our bus window into another bus at a stoplight, and it hit their bus driver in the head. It exploded on impact and their bus driver thought someone on her bus threw it, lol. Some kid was messing around with an apparently very sharp pencil and the bus hit a jump and she got some wicked air, sending the pencil partly through her leg. I think I was in grade 10. I lived on a dirt road out in the country, and so in the springtime, the thaw would cause the dirt to form a massive bump at the foot of this one hill. You could set your watch to this bump. It formed about the same time every year, without fail. Our bus driver was fully aware of this bump, but that didn't stop her from slowing down for it. Oh no, she decided one day to go full speed, probably about 50-60 kilometers per hour, over this sumbik. So you know how when you're at the back of a school bus, the bumps in the road are much more exaggerated? This one Asian dude, 2YU, learned about anterior bus physics in the most violent way. 2YU was chilling at the back of the bus when we hit the bump. The rest of the bus was silent, save for 2YU's wah. He hit the roof. That was a good day. Cool name. I'm guessing singing happy birthday to him was a great experience. On the way back from a field trip to the fire station, some kid stole some trauma shears. I was his assigned buddy for the day and we had to sit together. He showed them to me and I told him he'd better throw them away before he got back to school. He spun them around his finger and flung them out the window of the bus doing about 45 miles per hour. They stuck 2 inches deep in the right thigh of a morbidly obese, middle-aged black woman. He looked at me with a face that said, "How am I going to explain this to my cellmate?" Bus starts slowing down. We're stopped at a red light. This woman is moving like a linebacker towards us, screaming, "Stop the bus. Dem kids done stabbed me." She catches the fricking bus and is beating on the door screaming, "Call the police and remember lamps." Bus driver opens the door. She gets on with blood pooling by her foot, screaming and pointing at kids who might have stabbed her. Cops show up. My assigned friend is ghost pale and sweating bullets. They didn't even need to ask questions, just took him away in handcuffs. As he is being hauled off, he points at me and says he told me to throw them away. I yelled back, "I meant in a trash can, you dickwad." Heard he got 6 months in juvie. Never saw him again. Amber lamps. A kid called me a bee. I shut him down and ran him off the bus. Another girl, in high school, throwing up on me as I helped her. She'd an abortion, was sick and had to go to school anyway. Rumor had it was the result of her father assaulting her. Kids trying to light the seats on fire, lighting stuff on fire and throwing it. Axe bombs. One of the drivers just about swerved off the road to avoid a squirrel. Driving by a Waffle House where Kid Rock was getting arrested at the time. LOL. One of the bus drivers showed up drunk to the football game and was flirting with all the girls. A more wholesome memory was on the last day of school. The bus driver stopped and let us have a paper fight. One of our driver's ed teachers got arrested for DUI. Haha. Axe bombs. I got confused for a second before I remembered the deodorant there. A bus driver named Jim, 4th grade, was born and raised in Alaska. In the winter it gets -30 and colder on the regular, for weeks at a time. Technically kids weren't allowed to wear shorts to bus stop in winter. Jim never said anything to me about it. He went out of his way to be kind to me. A big jolly guy, with a cowboy hat. I can imagine him, with his jolly personality and a belly that jiggled like a bowl full of jelly and his reddish beard that surely turned white. He might have moonlighted as Santa by the time I hit high school. What Jim didn't know, or maybe he did, was I didn't have any other clothes. I didn't have anybody getting me up and off to school. I didn't have love. I barely had safety and only some days. I had little supplies, food, support and love. Jim went out of his way to make me feel special. He must have saw something, or known something. Looking back, he gave me special attention, letting the shorts thing pass. Letting me kinda boss the bus in a totally passive way. Just made me feel good. Not in a creepster way, either. I very clearly remember the last day of school. Jim put his cowboy hat on my head. We had never saw Jim without his brown cowboy hat. He took it off and sent me away with a "see you later kid." Boy oh boy, if he had any idea. Bus driver Jim that picked me up at 4th and Haller for all of my 4th grade year in small town Alaska. He made a difference. I don't remember what happened to that hat. I'm sure I held onto it for some time. But don't you know I felt like hot stuff walking home with Jim's hat on my head. Thanks Jim. I was 5 years old and a girl on the bus had been bullying me the entire way to my stop. At my stop, I turned around and landed a kick directly to her face and then I spun around and just walked off the bus. I was in 1st grade and a group of high school boys at the back of the bus decided to recruit me to listen to music with them. They said they wanted me to grow up to like good music. They were surprised when I recognized Pantera and Metallica as mom's house cleaning music. I don't think their plan worked. I like some terrible songs. I was a teacher's pet type of kid K-12. I very much sought the approval of my teachers and all adults, and I wanted them to like me more than anything in the world. I was terrified of being scolded or getting a poor grade. I was also pretty sheltered growing up. No brothers or sisters, just my parents, and they were fairly strict about what I could watch on TV or what video games I could play. But keeping all that in mind, this incident happened when I was in kindergarten. I was riding on the bus, and another student approached me. He told me I should stand up and stick both of my middle fingers up in the air. I didn't know what that meant, or that it was bad, so I just did what he asked. The kid then said something like, "Oh my god, you actually did it, you stuck up your middle finger." I was just like, okay, whatever. When we got to school, the freaking brat of a kid told the teacher what I had done on the bus. My teacher yelled at me and told me she was very disappointed in me and made me start recess and timeout. It was much more than my poor kindergarten heart could handle. I was completely devastated, sobbing the entire rest of the day, and when I got home too. If you're reading this, frick you Eric, you kindergarten traumatizing piece of crap. Found out my 8th grade girlfriend would cheat on me with my best friend after I got off the bus and they continued on to their stop. This happened for about 6 months. He ended up being my best man 20 years later. Had a black bus driver who was super funny and friendly with the kids. Whenever his favorite songs came on the radio, he'd pump the brakes to the music and get the bus pumping like it's on hydraulics. Bus driver slipped off a driveway when backing in. He called a tow truck and for another bus to come pick us up. Then he had everyone from the back of the bus move to the front because he was afraid the bus would slide all the way in the ditch with all the weight in the back. The ditch was probably 10+ feet deep and a complete drop off. Another time I was really sick on the way home and threw up on the bus. The bus driver ended up turning and brought us back to school to get a different bus because it was so bad. I went to Catholic school, so my bus experience usually consisted of taking the bus to a different school to transfer, and ending up stranded at a different school on multiple occasions. I also got into a fist fight for no apparent reason. Luckily my opponent, who decided to punch me for no reason, really sucked at fighting. Finally I got the cool bus driver and he took us to Dairy Queen. Problem is that caused me to miss my connection, leaving me stranded at crappy transfer school. What screams I peaked in high school? When I was in high school, this guy a year before me had a fearsome reputation. At house parties, people would fear him just by name alone. He would show up to parties with his cronies and start fights. He came from a decent enough family. Everybody wanted to be on his good side. Anyway, he graduates high school, and most of us were still in 12th grade. I remember he used to come around lunchtime to smoke with the people out front, shoot the breeze and talk about how much fun it is to just sleep in and do nothing and have all this freedom. A couple of months of occult of "why are you still here?" as we awkwardly shuffled back to class. Some of the popular girls from high school still get together very frequently, and you see updates of it on Facebook. I also keep in touch with some friends from high school, and I think that that's nice. However, one of those friends of mine once ran into them during one of their get-together. He said hi and happened to be sitting not too far from them at the bar. He said that all they did for the whole night was talk about high school. They looked up old classmates on Facebook, laughed at them, called them names, looked at their spouses and called them names too. They still thought themselves the popular kids, as if they still had some sort of influence on all these people. Everyone has moved on, done interesting things in their life except for them. They're just rehashing old drama and old rumors. One of those girls had a small bit of success as a photographer in high school. She won a couple contests that were aimed at teenagers and her photos aren't bad. Her parents turned this into a very big deal. Her friends all wanted to be in her photos, and she was dead set on going to art school and getting the recognition she deserved. I don't know if she never made it into art school or if she dropped out, but she definitely did not become a photographer. Instead, you see her launching some new startup business selling asinine live laugh love crap about once a year. I hate that kind of crap. I was hanging out with a good friend from middle school for a while, and we drink on our days off, and one day he just starts making all these lame jokes about people who went to our school, and I'm just thinking this would be funnier 15 years ago. A guy who graduated from my high school back in 2003 was arrested a few years ago for his second DUI. He was wearing his Letterman jacket in his mugshot. At my 10-year reunion, the prom queen came wearing a tiara with a custom Queen 03 sash over her shoulder. I had to go outside, I was laughing so hard, but I'll be damned if she didn't rock that outfit the whole time. So, respect. Still sad though. We used to play indoor floor hockey in a loft room in the big gym of my middle school. One game I scored 3 goals, one of them being a bank shot off the wall. The next year I wrote about the game for an assignment in English class and the teacher read it to the class the next day. I'm not sure which one was my peak. Oh bless your heart. Billy Joel feels compelled to write a ballad about how you and your ex were the king and the queen of the prom, how the two of you married right after high school, and how it all went to heck from there. Bonus points if your names happen to be Brenda and Eddie. Brenda and Eddie. As someone who recently graduated, the students who returned to the school every time they came home from school just so people would pay attention to them. Also not sure how to explain it, but the people who now posts blank screens and just text on their Snapchat stories that just say things like always crazy to see who you can really trust when this happens, or surprising to see who really cares about you when you need friends the most. Like I said, I don't know how to explain it, but there's definitely a correlation. Sharing every memory from Facebook, talking about the good old days and wish we could go back when it's only been a few years since graduation. I do the opposite. I delete half the memories. Want to earn money from home and set your own hours? Thank you all for the hella love. And sorry you all have had that bestie, read, distant acquaintance, reach out to you with a desperate sales pitch. Always showing up to the football field wearing your Letterman jacket, years after you barely passed summer school in order to graduate. At dawn after closing down the local bar, staring bleary-eyed into the empty field, mourning the passage of time. The class that graduated before me had their 10-year reunion last year, and apparently a big fight broke out over something that happened when they were all still in high school. I guess that is one way to tell if someone peaked in high school. Pretty embarrassing. When I was in high school, the cool kids partied hard. They'd get blackout drunk and used whatever illegal substances they can get. I was looking through the profiles of some of those classmates, and a few of them are still doing the same crap. Talking gangsta crap despite growing up in a middle-class suburb. Talking about how they miss their kids who are in a CPS custody because they went to jail for using. Going on rants about narcs, etc. They're about 27 or 28. What made you cool in high school makes you a loser as a grown butt adult, especially when you're a parent. Crap like that seems cool in school because it's not allowed or heavily discouraged. Then you see people who do crap like that when you grow up, and understand why it's so discouraged. Teachers who suck up to the athletes and other popular kids and ignore the less popular kids. My freshman year Spanish teacher was like that. At my high school, a coach was worshipped by the girls' basketball team. My first year of college, it came out he had been grooming the girls since middle school. 2012. Suddenly a lot of petty fights between the girls made so much sense. I went to school with a girl whose parents graduated from our high school 20 years prior. All 4 members of their family got the school's logo tattooed. Her boyfriend still goes to the football games and reposts his game highlights on Instagram. We're all 21, 22. I'm from New Mexico and live in the largest city in the state. We've never had a good HS football team, and the BF usually goes to pick up underage girls and brags to everyone about how he was the star football player. If someone from another team makes a really good play, he'll make some kind of remark about how he could have done it better, or he'll go into a detail about his JV football experience. I'll take big yikes for $200, Alex. 1. Still wearing your Letterman jacket and class ring in your 30s. 2. Talking about high school sports games from a different decade as if they meant something. 3. Still living in your hometown and looking forward to that night at the bar just before Thanksgiving when everyone who left comes home, so you can talk about high school stuff to people who have grown up and have real lives now. That last one is oddly specific, haha. I have a good one for this. My cousin once dragged me out to a local bar that I don't particularly care for due to its reputation, but I was going through a separation and figured I could use a night out. A guy comes up to me, clearly already drunk, and belligerently declares, "I've never seen you in here before." I replied, "That's because I've never been in here before." Him, "Well, I'm just saying I've never seen you here before." Me, "Okay." Him, "I'm John. I used to play football at the school up the road." You know the school just up the road? Up on the hill? Me, "Yes, I know the school. I went to the same school." Him, "Yeah, I played football there." Me, "Good for you." Him, "I don't remember you from school." Me, "I don't imagine you do." Him, "Well, I'm just saying, I played football there and I don't remember you." Me, "Okay." Finally he walked away, more like stumbled away. This was back in around 2013. I graduated in 04. He was 1 or 2 years ahead of me, so it had been over a decade since he graduated, and he was using his high school football to hit on chicks at the bar. He moved on to hit on my cousin, so I pretended to be her lesbian lover to chase him off, lol. She thanked me for it. Guy is a total tool and always was. My friends used to get together to play Halo, the old 4-person split screen multiplayer, and they'd destroy me every time. Now, we've all moved away and we play shooters together online occasionally. I win almost every time now that they can't see my screen. Those suckers screen peeked in high school. I love this. A guy graduated 2 years before me, in 2006. He got a job as a school narc my senior year. Basically a job that is somewhere below security, and barely a step above student. We had our 10-year reunion last year in the school gymnasium, and there he was, with his sunglasses on at 8 PM, sporting a sweet flavor saver and Dickies shorts, with his black socks pulled up to his knees, as was the fashion for all the bros at my high school when we attended. He was making his rounds, trying to enforce every single rule that was imposed on students. Meanwhile, We are all 27, 29 years old, and nobody is taking his crap. Eventually someone told him, "You were a freaking tool in high school, and nothing has changed. Get lost, knock." He then started listing every girl he boned in high school. It was hard watching that guy spiral so hard while everyone was laughing at him. That's so sad. Not letting go of old memories where you were QB on the football team, doing senior pranks, crapping on the freshmen, on and on and on, and just never shutting up about it. I have a friend, we'll call him Dave. That isn't his name because his family is Iranian, but we'll call him Dave. I also went to school with another person who I'll call Dickhead, because he is a dickhead. He refused to be called by his actual name anyway, and insisted on being called by his nickname, which for the purposes of this tale we shall call Massive W. Dave applied for a job and got it. It was a pretty serious gig, a finance job that paid extremely well. He got it and arrived for his first day. The guy who hired him showed him around the building, then showed him to his desk and introduced him to his immediate manager. It was Dickhead. This was literally about 15 years after we left school, and everyone who wasn't a fellow Dickhead thought Dickhead was far in the past. Nope. Dave said, "Oh hi Dickhead." Dickhead replied, "It's actually Massive W, if you don't mind." Dave said, "What? Still?" He then went down to the lobby and paced around for 10 minutes and then just walked out. Nobody wants Dickhead to be their boss. Dave now works elsewhere and seems happy. Dickhead, however, no idea. Don't care. Why? Because he is a proper freaking dickhead. A football coach at my high school held a record as a linebacker for when he was in high school in the 80s. One kid a few years ago on the first string varsity team came 30 yards away from breaking that record, and the coach promptly took him out of the game and kept him out for the rest of the season. Only one game left at that point, so no one could break his record from 30 years ago. One of the few good things, maybe the only good thing, about the UK's usually fricked education system is that hardly anyone, except those who have had an expensive private education, gives a frick about their old school. No loyalty to the old school. Sports loyalty when at school was practically non-existent. No one, apart from those on the teams, usually gave a crap about how the sports teams did. No yearbooks, no jackets, no proms, at least when I went to school. That aberration seems to be creeping in now. No one gives a frick. School reunions are rare if a thing at all here. I still know and see a few of my classmates or ones who were at school when I was there, but only because they still live locally and it's not that big a place. The others I have no idea where they are, how they are, even if they're still alive, and with maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, have no great wish to find out. Being a high school butthole then trying to reconnect with the people you look down on because daddy's money can't buy you friends. Still drinking in the same pub you drank in as a student, because that's now full of students. So you're that guy or girl who never left home and drinks with school kids much younger than you. I get older, they stay the same age. Never advancing your life past the moment when you graduate. I have a cousin who still lives with his parents, has had the same job he had since junior year, and has done frick all with his life. Alternatively, I have a cousin the same age still living with his mom, but he's going to college and taking care of his grandmother. I think he wants to make it as a concept artist, but he's working on a fallback degree before he makes the big leap. Huge difference. Wearing your class ring. Like, why were they a thing at all? They were so chunky and ugly and cost like $70 on the low end. Huge social media presence, full of interactions with people from high school that you are friends with, but never spend any time with in person. I see you have been on my Facebook. Lots of people added me that I have no interest in whatsoever. Really aggressive sport parents. I stayed in the same hotel as a little league team and there wasn't a single parent that I didn't despise. Going to high school parties when you are out of high school over a year. A year is okay as you may still have friends there, but after that it's just sad. I went to a couple of college parties 3 years after I graduated because my girlfriend was in college at the time, and I was like, I'm glad this part of my life is over. I couldn't imagine going to high school parties after graduation. Your only friends are from high school. You tell your college grad older brother yes you got a math heavy degree, But in high school I took algebra 2 and you took geometry like everyone else looking for the easy path. Says to older brother everyone looked down on you in high school. Gets P when older brother says you are 38. You graduated 20 years ago. Please tell me you have something to be proud of from the past 2 decades. That's oddly specific. I worked at a fast food restaurant. I saw people daily and normally forgot their conversations, but there are always those few who stick. Here's one. The dude walks up to the worker on the left of me with 3 other guys and is talking to his friends about how he hasn't paid rent yet and he's having it held over his head, but he knows he's going to get manager at the movie theater he works at, but his bosses just don't like him. This guy looks like he's in his early 30s, possibly late 20s. Definitely at least 28. The worst part of this story is when his other friend butts in and says, is it really paying rent when you're just paying your mom to stay at her house? I am no expert, but I can tell he didn't know whether to be sad or angry about what his friend said. He was also probably trying to hide the fact that he still lived with his mom from his other friends. I just realized that as I type this. AWW man. Poor dude. I hope he gets manager money. Wanna see my prom pictures? I used to be so fit back in HS. You should have seen me play ball back in the day. I probably could have gone to play college. Wanna see my highlight reel? I had a guy every other week when I was a teenager. Look how skinny I was back then. I was cheer captain at my HS. I made sure B feared me when I walked the halls. It's like, okay, we get it. You were popular and feared. We're nearly 30 now. Get over yourself. Reaching out to people you have not seen or spoken to since high school to get them to buy essential oils, protein shakes, leggings, makeup, scented candles, whatever else, or to be part of your downline. I did some work at a guy's house when I was about 20 when I was on summer break from college. I was doing some landscaping and such. This guy was a cop, about 35, and was married with a pretty nice house. I would work there and he would pop over to the house once or twice a day for lunch or whatever and would check on how the work was going. But one day he tells me to come to the garage with him. He is searching around the garage for something but won't tell me what. Finally he finds a box with his old homecoming crown from high school when he was named homecoming king. He started talking about how high school was such great memories and all that. He was trying to show off and thought I'd be really impressed. But I was really embarrassed for him, to be honest. That's actually not the worst thing I've read thus far. I mean, if he's making a living, married, and has a pretty nice house, that's a success story compared to a lot of these other people. Having your parents spend over $1K on a custom designed prom dress, but not even having a date. Also having your rich parents throw you a music festival for your birthday that is named after you. A person's name Chella. I'm very interested to see what the next decade outside of high school is like for this individual. So did they graduate, or are you wondering what will happen when they graduate? I'm a little bit confused. Anybody have that video of that D-bag bro trying to recruit other D-bag bros to his pyramid scheme? He has testimonials of other D-bag bros talking about how they drive Lamborghinis and crap. They're all late 20s or so and all wearing like clearance bin TJ Maxx suits. Sound familiar? Everyone in the video screams. I peaked in high school. I work in HR and once had a resume that mentioned the applicant had been the captain of the local high school football team. He was in his 50s at the time he submitted this application. My mom, a 42-year-old, has a giant stack of numbers that boys gave her in high school. She brings them out to brag every now and then. It's embarrassing. Germans of Reddit. How was Adolf Hitler taught in your school? In general, you come back to World War II and the Holocaust several times during school. I read Anne Frank's diary in religion class in I think 7th grade. Hitler's rise to power and the Holocaust usually are taught in 8th, 9th and again in 12th grade. However, you might analyze some speeches or the political system during other classes than history too. Here's the explanation of what we were taught. During early years you learn how evil Hitler and the Nazis were, how many people died because of them and what the Holocaust was. Then you might learn what that meant on an individual level for Jews, and Frank's diary. As you go further you learn how the Nazis came to power, why Germans voted for them and how the propaganda worked. Finally you start to analyze the conditions that made regular people become mass murderers or fanatical soldiers of the Third Reich. As you can see, you start with a clear black-white image, then learn why they came into power, and finally question yourself if you could have been one of those people and how to prevent such a thing from ever happening again. Alongside this, you might visit a concentration camp. I myself visited Buchenwald and Hadamar, a euthanasia site, in which, for example, disabled people were killed. Alongside this, you might analyze speeches, art or songs of that period in different classes. Well, we first got taught about the World War I and then went into how Hitler started as a small boy, how he got into politics, etc. Then World War II and the Holocaust. After that we went to a concentration camp near Berlin. It was truly heartbreaking walking around there and seeing everything. Seeing the gas chambers, the beds, the clothes and the numbers they were given instead of their names. We even met someone who survived the KZ. I can't even imagine what he went through. That sounds very rough to go through a KZ. We never had a chance to do that, but we went to Bunker Valentin next to Bremen where a factory for submarines was planned. Also the prison camp called Sandbostel where the workers was held under pretty bad circumstances, especially the Russian ones. We heard stories about their food were made out of wood shavings. We have him in school now. I'm from Germany. Well, basically he is taught to us in a very neutral way. We learn how he seized power, started the Second World War, etc. But when it comes to the very bad things like killing of millions of Jews, teachers usually say how bad he was. I learned half a year of 9th grade about him and the Nazi regime. Now we have him in the second half of the 11th grade. So we learn a lot about the Nazis. Actually, BC, the government doesn't want us to forget the brutal past. I'm Austrian, but I guess that still counts. Also, please feel free to correct me on any grammatical spelling errors, as English is not my first language. We're covering World War II right now actually. First we learned about World War I and its aftermath, then about how Hitler gained power and how he became Chancellor. Our current topic is the Anschluss. We've watched a video of one of Hitler's speeches, and next year we're going to go on an excursion to Mauthausen to see the KZ concentration camps. There, I've read the Diary of Anne Frank, but we're not reading it at school. My teacher does teach the lessons neutrally, I think, but sometimes, like for example when we watched the video of Hitler's speech or when we were talking about the deportation of Jewish people, she puts emphasis on how horrible this era of history truly was. I guess that if we didn't have an idea of how much people suffered during this time and how many lives the war cost, history would be much more likely to repeat itself. Your grammar and spelling is better than my English teachers. I live in America. Our history classes were very chronologically all through high school, and by the time we reached World War II you were clearly old enough to know about Hitler and World War II, so our history classes were really quite neutral and focused on facts and backgrounds. However, the topic of World War II, Hitler and the committed atrocities by the Nazi regime popped up in other classes basically from beginning of high school, even primary school. You'd read stories or books about it, watch movie clips, go to exhibitions, etc. When that topic was talked about in those classes, it was more about all the horrors that were inflicted by the Nazi regime, what it meant to the people at that time, both victims and followers, and a very critical reflection and analysis on why this could happen and how to prevent it from happening again. In the end, the subtext of all these classes were a lot about ethics, morals, human behavior, human faults, human inhumanity, realizing your own shortcomings and the responsibility you had to understand what happened, how it happened, and to prevent it from happening. Obviously, the way things were taught and talked about were very different depending which age you were as a kid, but you have to realize that for Germans you usually don't learn about the Nazi past in school, but you just know it before. It's on TV a lot, magazine covers, etc. Sometimes you still have older relatives who lived in that time. My grandparents were in their 20s during World War II, so I knew from them. But for me, school sort of brought all the snippets that I knew together and formed a bigger picture and made me understand a lot of things. I'd also like to hear from other people in Europe, specifically Polish, Czechs, Austrians, Hungarians, and Slovaks. Hungarian who went to a very liberal Jewish high school here. In class it was definitely approached a lot more objectively. Attending Holocaust memorials and studying in a building that was literally used to hide Jewish families during the war kind of taught us about the brutalities without our teachers going into much detail about it. I'm not German. In fact, I'm Japanese. I lived and worked in Germany in the 1950s. The country was still in its rebuilding stages and the evidences of the horrible carnage the country suffered was all over. I became good friends with a few Germans who lived in the same neighborhood I did. They became friendly with me upon learning that I was of Japanese descent and they sort of looked at me as an ally of theirs. We talked about the war and Hitler and a couple of my friends were quite open with me extolling the good that Hitler had done for Germany. After World War I, Germany was in pretty bad shape. They told me about how Hitler came upon the scene and he rebuilt the country and brought pride to the people of their new prosperity. To a man they denounced the treatment of the Jews, but a few of them repeated some of the old suspicions of the Jewish people that Germans held before and during the war. Upon their asking, I related to them how my relatives in Japan were taken in by the nationalistic rhetoric of the times there but now regretted their country's turn to its militarism. Like the Germans who told of how their country was brought up from its poverty after World War I to its new prosperity, my relatives related how life improved for them with the new regime that, unfortunately, led them to World War II and their new misery. Both my German friends and my relatives in Japan were taken in by their leaders and never envisioned the horror of the events that followed. My grandparents are Austrian, and the Holocaust absolutely breaks their hearts, because they really truly believe Hitler was turning things around. The propaganda was very real. Lengthily and structurally, no focus on the person but rather the systems and causalities that led to him taking and consolidating power, starting with World War I think if you'd wake me at 3 in the morning now, almost 20 years later, and ask me what made Europe the powder keg it was at the start of the 20th century, I'll still be able to mumble out militarism, nationalism and imperialism in a matter of seconds. Also, yes, that makes thinking about the US right now a tad uncomfortable. American HS teacher here. In my state they just removed the graduate requirement because they couldn't find enough teachers. Yeah, they did that instead of raise the amount they pay us. German school history in a nutshell, at least mine. Half a year ancient Greeks and Romans. Half a year Middle Ages. Rest of school career. World War I. Triuity of Versailles. NS Germany. It was the dominant topic in school. Hitler was treated the way he was. Everything on the table. We even went on a multi-day trip to visit a concentration camp. Dachau. In my case it was taught severely. Not just in history class but also in ethics class or philosophy. Also not just in 1 year. Moreover all my secondary school time. 5th grade to 13th grade. In history we learned about the political structures that led to World War I and therefore to World War II. In philosophy we discussed about how we think we would behave in such a regime. In ethics we watched movies like Clockwork Orange or The Experiment. My school also had a trip to Dachau. It was awful to say at least, but I think it's important for every German to go to a KZ at least once. There is no law or something like that but most schools I know of do a trip with their older pupils. Also not school in particular but on our TV history channels, N24, NTV, do a lot and I mean a lot of World War II documentaries. In every major city I know of are a lot of museums Mandenkmale, memorials of shame I guess, and memorials for courage people like Die Weiss Rose, the White Rose who fought against the regime. There are daily reminders who are important especially because we have a newish racist party who gains more and more power. That's really scary like the people learned nothing. I agree that every German should visit a KZ. We did a trip to Auschwitz recently, but there was only a restricted number of participants who could come and it was over a weekend since we had to fly from Germany to Poland, so there were very few people. We all came to the same conclusion after getting out of there. Every German, at least every student, should see a KZ, as horrifying as it might be. My teacher actually got really uncomfortable teaching just because I was German. One time she even took me out of the room which was really unnecessary. That's just kinda racist. Germans today aren't any more or less Nazis than anyone else. Your teacher was an idiot. I think most of the schools in Germany really do a good job teaching us about the history of our country. I mean, there is a reason Germans are not really proud to be German, although nowadays we can. Of course, we learned about concentration camps and all of the other horrible things. Our teacher made it very visual with pictures and recordings of speeches. It really stuck with me. It was very upsetting and maybe sometime a lot to drop on young kids. But what I found very important is that we learned a lot about how he even got the power and what little things went wrong in the very beginning. And we tried to make connections to things happening today all around the world. It made all of us very aware of those details and problems, and me and my friends often talk about it. So although Germany has such a bad history, we try not to forget it, and school constantly confronts the students. I mean, it is probably not like that everywhere, but it should. We are proud of not being proud. I am from Austria and I was told how he became powerful and what he did in order to get there, etc. Well, most of the things you need to know about the topic. But as I visited Hartheim, I got told a bit more. Hartheim was the location of a concentration camp for disabled people, and my mother knew someone from there and he told us a lot of things they don't tell you in school. The Nazis made a lot of scientific discoveries as they tried to create the Aryan race. Basically, they wanted to all handsome people with white skin and blue eyes, and they did a lot in order to get there. One of those things I got told was that they knew about the fact that if a woman is pregnant with twins and the blood of one baby gets into the eye of the other while they are in the womb, it could cause a change of eye color from brown to blue. So they made tests on living twin children where they took blood from one and ingested it into the eye of the other with a syringe. Another thing I heard was that especially in Hartheim, where they had a lot of disabled people, they did not see them as living things, so they made practical use of their bodies after those experiments. So they made bags and lampshades out of the skin. Today there is a hospital especially for disabled people in Hartheim, and one of the patients is an artist my mum knew from her childhood. He is painting pictures with his feet and mouth because he can't move his arms. Those are some pretty weird paintings. I try to find them. I actually wasn't taught a lot about Hitler now that I think about it. I was taught more in general how the Nazis rose to power, which of course also went into Hitler. My main problem with answering the question is that I also watched an aston of documentaries at the same time, so I can't exactly tell you what I have from school and what I have from documentaries. I believe the main part I've had about Hitler was on some types of political campaigning he did. Flying to different towns by plane to campaign, which was unheard of back then, etc. Also that he took acting classes to train his speeches and erratic movements during his speeches. We get tuffed about him quite extensively to make sure we get the message. We learned about him and World War II for years in history, and even in literature we had to read books about the era, especially about the genocide against the Jews. I had to read The Boy on the Stripped Pajama and The Diary of Anne Frank. And we had a field trip to Auschwitz-Birkenau. I think our school did a good job on making us get what horrible things happened back then. I don't wanna read the entire, we had textbooks here. Movies, their thing again that everyone posted before me. It was very in detail, and the first time we covered the Third Reich was in 4th grade. I just wanted to add that school sent me to visit 2 former concentration camps, and it's been 2 very traumatic and eye-opening experiences. We've focused on the NSDAP as a whole. Hitler was treated as just another high-ranking functionary like Goebbels, Göring and Himmler. Funny enough, though, Stalin was the center topic of several periods. On the other hand, our history teacher at the time spent decades teaching in the German Democratic Republic before the reunification. Guess she has simply kept the old pattern and merely toned the glorification of the Soviet Union and its leaders down a bit. This topic, Germans tell us about, you learned about Hitler. Americans, this topic is now about us and our experiences learning about Native Americans. We started in 7th grade and talked about World War II all the way up to 13th grade, for 6 months each year. It started off with basic facts, allies and enemies, to events in chronological order, the visit to the concentration camp, and ended with viewing pictures of starving Jews in the ovens. Pretty traumatized. We also had survivors come to our school and talk to us. Well, our teacher, I'm from Germany, always kinda tells us if you share this man's ideas then you're clearly the lowest scum of society. Okay, so we do learn about Hitler and all the bad crap he did, but we also learned about how good of a public speaker he was and how amazing he was at controlling people's ideas. They drilled into our minds the horrible past of the Nazis to make sure we don't forget. We did a separate lesson about the Holocaust. Our teacher was very serious. He is serious all the time, but I never saw him that serious. After the lesson he said that everyone who denies that terrible thing happened, or everyone that follows people who deny it, our country is full of right-wing extremism at the moment, is a big butthole and stupid. I really like that teacher. I'm Danish, but I went to a German school from 5th-7th grade. We actually was told almost the exact same as when I went to Danish school. He was a big leader, extremely good at convincing, but an evil man. We was told all about the Auschwitz, deaths of Jews, the border change between Denmark and Germany, and of course much more I can't remember anything about. I think the point of your question was to see if some school would hide or censor anything, but I don't think any of the schools I went to did. Germans doesn't want to forget what happened in World War II. They just want to move on or be forgived, since most of the population of Germany has nothing to do with World War II, and there's only less people from the events alive the further we go. I'm kinda tired of this question, but as others said, very thoroughly, with the intention to never let this happen again, and always remember, most also visit concentration camps that are turned into memorials now. Not sure about the books, but they took my wife's class to see Schindler's List when she was 12 or 13. Pretty brutal at that age, I'm sure. Well, mostly you get over the war dates and stuff in 9th grade. Every German class is obligated to visit a concentration camp or euthanasia center for the disabled. I visited Hadamar. It was chilling to say the least. My history teacher was very observant, especially in lower grades, to maybe spot those with troubled home life and catch them before they go down on the wrong path. Later in grade 10-12 we mostly tried to figure out and understand the twisted psychology that drives people to leaving their feelings of guilt and morale behind in order to commit such crimes. All in all, I would say we really went in depth more on the terror that was brought over both Germany and invaded countries more than the actual person Adolf Hitler. We only briefly touched on the Nuremberg processes and the consequences for the country. My grandma used to say, "We deserve no respect for rebuilding the country. We were the ones who let it happen in the first place. It was our duty." With all that said, I went to one of the higher education schools in the country, and I know that there are many that only very briefly touch on the topic at all besides the obligatory concentration camp visit, and at that point many lack the knowledge to contextualize the importance of the place. In summary, Germans learn about the Holocaust a lot better than Americans learn about the takeover of America from natives. Well, we were taught a shitting of stuff about Russia Revolution during after World War I and about World War I itself and how World War II started, but when it really comes to the war, most teachers I have had try to finish the topic ASAP BC. They don't want to talk about it. Well, actually the lessons are about the Third Reich and how it was politically established, what ideology was behind it, and so on. Also a strong focus on the concentration camps and all the victim groups. I think that was important because focusing on one person can actually nourish a cult. That's how it should be, in my opinion. That's what it says in most curricula. Just look at the right-wing party in Germany now and how strong it gets and what they say. We've had the whole process in school. From WW1 to his prison time to rise to power to World War II and its atrocities to post-war time and Marshall Plan and separation of East and West Germany. For me it was over grades 8, 9, and 10 in history class. It's also very common to take a trip to the nearest concentration camp. For me it was Buchenwald and very impressive, but not in a good way. Heavy crap. This subject is usually omnipresent. I don't get how we can have such a radical right wing again. What is a fact that has been told to you in a classroom that was eventually proven to be false? This is a story of a different time, but my mom grew up in Virginia before during the civil rights movement and went to a segregated school. In all her textbooks they showed slaves getting off slave ships with suitcases. I'd be interested in seeing these textbooks. Living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, my schools never once mentioned the race riots that happened here in 1921, when whites bombed and burned black Tulsa to the ground. They almost completely leveled it. And all because the black community was prospering. I get the sense that it is not taught almost anywhere in America today. In 2nd grade, my teacher told the entire class that loathe meant to love very much. Throughout the day, she would tell us, "Oh, I loathe you, children. I loathe you too." 2nd grade teacher. She definitely knew. My teacher once told us that you only use 10% of your brain. A few years later, another teacher said if you really think you only need 10% of your brain, you should donate the other 90% to scientific research immediately. It came about from only 10% of your neurons are firing at any given moment, arguably a crap statement itself. Then the ESP movement that was really popular during the 50s 70s got a hold of it and used it as an explanation for why they should get federal grants and TV appearances. If only JREF materials were mandatory in schools. Not me but my so. In primary school he asked his teacher how the propellers on a helicopter worked. The answer he got was that there was a large rubber band inside the helicopter that kept the propeller spinning really fast so the helicopter could take off. Sounds like your so was taught by Calvin's dad. My teacher told me that if the earth was 1 foot closer or 1 foot further from the sun, we'd all burn up or freeze. Ahem, the earth's orbit is elliptical. My basement is cold. Myth confirmed. My freaking 4th year teacher told us Neil Armstrong wasn't the first man on the moon, and that the Russians got there first. Even at that young age I knew the teacher was talking bollocks. In 6th grade my friend's teacher taught her class that pi is 3.141414141414141414, repeating forever. He got sent home for challenging her on it. That people have a more developed left or right brain hemisphere, and it makes them more logical versus more intuitive. Poland sent their cavalry against German tanks in World War II. Daddy long legs are incredibly poisonous, but can't penetrate human skin. I'd want my money back if education wasn't free. They did take all of your time. That next grade all essays would be required to be in cursive. Never happened, and now all essays are required as printouts or digital files. Not specifically my story, but during bio class, I think, in high school, while going over the reproductive system the teacher said that boys cannot pee when they have an erection. The urethra is blocked or some other stupid crap. A friend called her out on it as bulls. He said that's bulls. I just used the urinal with a boner. That the world would end on the 21st of December 2012. Teacher had to quit 2 months later because of depression and circulatory failure. Fun times. My biology teacher didn't understand evolution at all. She wasn't creationist or anything, but she taught us that a single organism's genes can change in its lifetime, depending on what it needs. She basically pulled a Michael Kelso and said the equivalent of, if I needed to go faster to catch prey, I'd grow rockets on my feet. If I'm not wrong, that's how Lamarck described evolution. Oh, there's loads. I eventually learned when I got older that much of what I had been taught in the early years of school was complete horse crap. The Athenian warrior runner Phidippides did not run 26 miles and drop dead at the gates of Athens after the battle with Sparta. The Celts are not originally from India. Blood is not blue until it touches the air. Columbus was not trying to prove the earth was round. People in the Middle Ages didn't think the earth was flat. The Celts are not originally from India. What? Why would someone even think that? What? The teacher is older than you and therefore knows best. That was actually in my school's honor code in the section about not arguing with teachers. Complete bulls. Benjamin Franklin's kite. Never freaking happened. But damn it if it wasn't in our elementary textbooks. Also, America won the Revolutionary War because we had something worth fighting for. But like the British soldiers were all, not really feeling it. Guess I'll just get bayoneted. It was kind of a sideshow. A science teacher in high school once adamantly insisted that you would die in space by freezing instantly, because he'd seen it in movies. I spoke up and said you don't freeze in space instantly because there's nothing physically there to take your thermal energy away. You die by decompression and then slowly radiate your heat away. I was super uncool. People made fun of me. Everybody left class that day thinking he was right. not decompression, asphyxiation. The lack of pressure is dangerous and would kill you eventually, but it would take longer than you could hold your breath. The lack of oxygen is what would actually kill you. In my sophomore year high school, I had an English teacher who believed in spontaneous generation. She told us that maggots come from rotting meat, therefore flies come from rotting meat. This is exactly what Reddy disproved in his experiments in the 17th century. I mean the exact experiment. I can't remember exactly what poem we were analyzing when she said this, but it was a very far-fetched comparison to the text we were reading. I go to a private school, and when she said this, I was thinking my parents wasted their money. I have to say, good on you for knowing that. When I first started teaching, I over-prepared heavily for classes, fearing that students would ask me all sorts of questions related to the material. They almost never do. The lack of intellectual curiosity outside topics that will be on the test is disturbing. First grade, you can't subtract a bigger number from a smaller number. Third grade, sure you can, negative numbers, but you can't multiply by 0. Fourth grade, sure you can, the answer is also 0, but you can't have a fraction with non-integer components. Fifth grade, sure you can, it's just division, but you can't take the square root of a negative number. Seventh grade, sure you can, those are imaginary numbers, but you can't have an infinite series. High school, sure you can, that's basic pre-calc, but you can't do math on things that aren't numbers. College, you know what, frick all those guys. That if you tied two people's left arm behind their back and they had a child, and you tied that child's left arm behind their back and they had a child with another person whose left arm was tied behind their back, and so on and so forth, that eventually their descendants would be born with no left arm. They said it was how evolution worked, and that came from my favorite history teacher. I guess that's why they taught history and not biology. Schizophrenia consists of people who have split personalities. False. Schizophrenic patients have a variety of characteristics such as hallucinations and delusion, but never has their personality split. That is called dissociative personality disorder and is commonly associated as schizophrenia. Our health teacher told us it was impossible for a woman to get pregnant from rape. Something along the lines of her body simply wouldn't allow the fetus to grow. Yup. That's some dangerous crap to teach, for all kinds of reasons. My history teacher liked to add stuff onto her lessons, like how the King of England wrote in his diary that nothing of notice happened today, on the day the Declaration of Independence reached him. In truth, he apparently didn't keep a diary. A ton of stuff in chemistry changes every year. That women cannot have hemophilia. My biology teacher then went on to add that if they could carry this, menstruation would be fatal as the blood would not stop. That this symbol meant that the item to the left was greater than the item to the right. Only one person in the classroom decided to argue, based on a, the obvious implications of a little end and a big end, and b, the use of the symbol in musical notation to denote volume. He later had his mum visit the school and show the teacher a book. Only at that point did the teacher revisit the subject. This was in the penultimate year of primary school, 5th year. The Pac-Man eats the bigger number. Everyone knows that. I before E except after C. To that I say, I deify your deity. You shall not heist my sovereignty. Seize the veil and forfeit the heinous. Weird. Everyone is a unique and beautiful person. I've since learned a good portion of people are driven by spite and advertising. And greed. I attended a Catholic school from kindergarten to university, so I think you know the fact I was told that if I didn't eat my broccoli, the boogeyman would get me. We couldn't use calculators because you wouldn't always carry one with you to help you out, except for, you know, smartphones nowadays. I disagree. I need mental arithmetic at work every day. It's very frustrating teaching student pilots to fly when they can't do simple mental arithmetic. Yes, I have a smartphone with me, but I'm not going to pull it out to calculate my crosswind when I'm just about to land my plane. When I was little, I was told during a DARE program speech that one time a guy went to a party and puffed on one marijuana cigarette and died instantly because of how bad it was for you. I already saw this documentary on the legalization of drugs talking about how there are no reported cases of people dying from weed. I wanted to point it out, but I decided not to. It was from that day forward that I realized that just because you are older doesn't mean that you always tell the truth. Yeah, I was told in DARE that smoking a single joint was the equivalent of smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. Pretty sure that's not true. Diagrams of bodies have blue veins because blood in veins is blue. It wouldn't be so bad if I wasn't in high school when I was taught this. I also got into an argument once with a teacher in 5th grade because I said a desert can be any arid place. It doesn't have to be hot and sandy. He insisted a desert has to be hot and sandy and it doesn't have to do with precipitation. Guys, when you were told in school that Pluto was a planet, it really was. Sure, scientists classify it differently now, but that doesn't retroactively make your teacher a liar. In 3rd grade I had a substitute teacher who tried to tell us that kilometers were longer than miles because the metric system was more efficient. My 8th grade teacher told us that frick originated from the acronym for unlawful carnal knowledge. Kids have it easy today with Google and Snopes.com on their phone for calling out bulls. That lactic acid buildup is the cause of sore muscles. It's actually small tears. That E330 causes cancer. That thing is in everywhere, as it's actually just citric acid. The confusion originated out of mistranslation of Krebs apparently, and basically all of physics up until they mentioned Einstein. There actually is not widely approved consensus on the sore muscles. Few different theories exist, tears being one of them. Not me, but a couple of months ago my mom, she teaches 3rd grade, said that some new teacher was teaching her kids that the sun isn't a star, and that stars are really small, nothing like our sun. It's sad that jobs like teaching or being a cop or joining the military used to be jobs that people wanted to do because they were great respectable jobs to have that benefited society. Now they seem to be a last resort for people who couldn't make it anywhere else. It's like a real life equivalent of the Night's Watch from Game of Thrones. No one can remember why it's important and don't think it's worth the time or effort to do anymore. Eventually it's just thieves and murderers being grabbed from jails and given a life sentence protecting the world from the greatest threat of all time. Ignorant children or criminals or terrorists. Muscle weighs as much as fat, because a pound of muscle weighs as much as a pound of fat. I had the worst health teacher. When I was in an English school in Quebec in the 70s we were taught that we were supposed to change our names to French names. Like if your name was Peter you had to change it Pierre. If there was no French alternate to your name then you were obliged to sign your name with a bunch of completely unnecessary diacritic marks. Which was completely subjective and had no consistency, so matter how you tried to sign your name it would be marked wrong and you would have marks taken off whatever you handed in. It was really our French teachers were just a bunch of buttholes who hated teaching in an English school. The left to right political spectrum, often placing Russian-style communism on the far left and fascism on the far right. This system is too simplified to be correct. There are actually 4 branches to take into account when considering a political spectrum. The traditional left and right refer to the economic attitudes of an ideology or government. So the far left would be fundamentalist socialism and the far right would be market fundamentalism, or neoliberalism. There is then an up and down scale, which is focused on the social attitudes and civil liberties etc. of a government ideology. The top is the furthest authoritarian, or totalitarian government, and the bottom is an anarchist system. The result of this would mean that both Russian-style communism and fascism would be at the top of the spectrum, both being authoritarian in nature, with Marxism and anarcho-capitalism being the extreme left and right of the bottom. Fascism however would vary in where it sits on the left and the right, as it is related to nationalism as opposed to economic policy. Most current governments would sit just up and right of the center, varying depending on the strength of the unions in the country and attitudes towards immigration and things like gay marriage. When I moved from California to North Carolina, I found myself about 2 years ahead in school. Obviously, they put me in the gifted program, but that was a huge joke. They basically pulled me from a couple classes, I can't remember which, and had me play trivia games instead during those periods. There was this one other kid from California there, and he acted like the Queen of freaking France, telling everyone that he's from California so he has to be smarter. It ends up that this kid and I are tied at the end of the game. Since the kid's mom was a doctor and the teacher was about who decided to ask a lot of super advanced anatomy questions, and so we moved on to the tiebreaker round. The tiebreaker question was asking about the largest desert in the world. At the same time, he blurts out Sahara and I blurt out Antarctica, and this kid gives me this derisive, almost pitying look as if I'd just told him the earth was flat and everything revolved around it. He laughs at me, and the teacher starts laughing at me too. And the teacher tells me through tears of laughter, Marek, Antarctica isn't a desert because it's very wet, and a desert has to be very dry. Given that this was the end of 5th grade, that explanation pissed me off to no end, and so I snapped. I told the teacher she was stupid, marched to the library, brought the encyclopedia back to the room. The librarian was not happy, but she was the one teacher at that school I actually liked, so she was fine, especially when I told her what happened. Showed them the entry which proved me right, and then told the class that they were all stupid, and I was leaving, because I wouldn't learn anything either way so I might as well be around nice people, and that was how I left the gifted program. In Catholic school my science teacher told us all the sky is blue because it reflected off the ocean. That exact quote. That water goes down the drain counterclockwise in the north hemisphere and clockwise in the south hemisphere. It actually depends much more on the drain shape and irregularities than anything else. I went to a Catholic K-8th grade school run by nuns, and while they didn't know crap about the Bible, Old and New Testament, and I'm not talking about interpretation, just real basic stuff they got completely wrong. Serious, Redditors who went to private religious schools, what are your horror stories? My best friend growing up went to one for a year. He was in public school with me till he had a health problem. His parents were scared the kids would make fun of him, so they transferred him. The next year he showed back up at the school and told us there was nothing actually Christian about Christian school, which seemed really poignant coming from a 12-year-old. His stories show those kids were much crueler than any I ever encountered at school. Principal who was known for grabbing students by the neck and slamming them against a wall, having to attend church every Sunday or else you would be expelled from school, after 3 strikes per year, not being allowed to use the bathroom during class, only 2 5-minute break periods outside of the 15-minute lunch period every day, no recess periods, not allowed to talk to classmates after the final class every day, on school grounds or on a bus, not allowed to wear shirts that have designs on them, mandatory after school study hall if any grade was below a C. For what it's worth, I went to a Lutheran school from K-8th grade. I went to a private Catholic elementary school. The sheer number of people from my school that ended up going through absolutely horrifying events in their lives is appalling. I am no expert, but I do not believe it would be statistically possible for that many people from one school to experience that much loss and heartbreak and tragedy. We've commented on occasion that we are cursed. One kid in a Catholic school got expelled for trying to shock the nun teaching the class. He was supposed to lead the class in daily prayer during Mary's month, by saying, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to you." Instead, as a gag, he said, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have intercourse with you." No real horror stories. I was in Catholic school from kindergarten to college. Grade school was tough, not because of the teachers, but because it was the same 35 kids for 9 years. Any horror stories I have were from the other kids, not faculty. My high school math teacher was expelled from the church and was defrocked from being a priest after he had a same-sex relationship with a student that he claimed started on the kid's 18th birthday. He avoided jail time, but all references to him, he was president of the school for a while, have been scrubbed with fricking bleach from the school. College was Catholic, but just like, there was a priest or nun here and there. For all intents and purposes, it was just a secular liberal arts school. I got 2 weeks detention for bringing a kid's book on evolution to school and asking if evolution made it possible for all the animals to fit on the ark. My thinking was that back in Noah's day there was only one species of elephant, horse, lion, etc. So there wouldn't be the problem of fitting multiple species of one family into the ark. Then after the ark, evolution kicked in and we got different species after they repopulated the world. To my mind, this was a perfectly fine way to resolve the young earth equals evolution bad and science is cool conflict I was having. Nope. Apparently I was thinking too much and needed to be punished for not believing what the Bible said. I've always thought this way: if something did create us, then it almost certainly put a system in place where things could change and adapt. If something has created us, then science is the rules it has put in place. We had a priest who turned out to be a pedo. I know he tried to groom me at one point, but turns out I was too depressed to buy any of that crap. Only time depression was a good thing. He was convicted a year or a bit after I left for offenses against at least 3 boys and spent the rest of his life in prison. 4 priests in my HS. 3 of them are now accused pedos. The 4th left the priesthood to marry a woman. Generally that would be frowned upon, but in this situation, he's not looking too bad. My parents love to tell a story about what a difficult student I was. The story, as they tell it, is that I once accused my math teacher of being a Nazi because I don't like math. What actually happened was that my math teacher spent an entire period fantasizing out loud about the day when God would ordain good Christians rounding up and killing all the gays. I called him a Nazi because he was standing there daydreaming about committing genocide to a class full of 16-year-olds. I got the problem child label, too. Took me a while to realize it wasn't because I was an actual problem and more because they didn't know what the frick they were doing. I don't know how much of a horror story this is, but I still think back on it sometimes. I went to Catholic school when I was a kid, and every Thursday, I'd walk with the rest of my class to a nearby church to attend a students-only mass. Unlike the rest of my friends, though, I hadn't been baptized, which meant that I was expressly forbidden from participating in the snack time portion of the service. Everyone else would stand up, shuffle between the pews, and get their little cracker, while I was forced to sit and watch, envious and hungry. Mass usually took place immediately before lunchtime, which may have been part of the issue. Anyway, one day, the local priest came to my class to discuss something or other, and he brought a supply of unblessed communion wafers with him. Since they hadn't yet been subjected to the ritualistic hand-waving and prayer reciting process, I was finally allowed to consume one. But before I had the chance, one of my classmates made an observation. "These taste different," she said. Our teacher, a former nun, nodded knowingly. Yes, they always taste different when they haven't been blessed. This seemed peculiar to me, and it prompted me to ask a question of my own. When you bless them, I asked the priest, do all of these in the church get blessed? Yes, that's why we keep them in the tabernacle, he replied. The conversation continued after that, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was busy hatching a plan. With as much dexterity as my 9-year-old fingers could manage, I broke my wafer down the middle, sampling the smaller of the 2 halves and then keeping the larger piece in my desk. When the next Thursday rolled around, I brought the bit that I'd saved along with me, waited for the blessing to occur, then ate the rest of it. It tasted the same to me. TLDR. I once stole a blessing in an effort to taste test Jesus. Went to Catholic school from 1st to 8th grade. I could probably go on forever, but I'll give you some highlights. 3rd grade, teacher tied a kid to his chair and taped his mouth shut because he wouldn't sit down and shut up. 8th grade, the boys and girls had separate gym classes, so while one was in gym the other was in math. We girls walked into math class one day to see a kid on the floor in the corner of the room literally caged in by school desks. Don't know what he did, but when he tried to straighten out one of his legs and one of the desks tipped over, the nun, she was built like a linebacker, dragged him out of his prison and literally threw him out the door and across the hall. Years after I was out of school, my mom called to tell me my 7th grade teacher had been arrested for molesting kids. I said, it was boys, wasn't it? And she was floored. We girls all knew he was weird and he used to say some really inappropriate crap to the boys, so no surprise there. Worst 8 years of my life. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, Put me, a Jew, in Catholic school. I got blamed for everything that ever happened in that school. Hey Father Crankapants, the toilets on the 3rd floor of the administration building are clogged. I bet LJ3 did it. So he's in another building and has no access. Detention for LJ3. Sister Nuclear Cricker, a bird hath lain shite upon thy car. I bet LJ3 put them up to it. Sister, the bird was in flight. I was just letting you know. Detention for LJ3. I guess it was either worship you or blame you for everything. Probably should have grown your hair out and worn sandals. Grew up Catholic. Went to private school for 2 years. Some fun things that happened. Bullies galore. Some kids are sent there as rehab thinking that their children will learn. Turns out a kid I knew was involved with drugs from an early age and yelled them and all throughout high school. Our class got yelled at for not sounding enthusiastic enough when we prayed. No one gave a crap because we cared about actual schoolwork mostly. Still got punishment, but nothing changes. Detentions and in-school suspension. ISSs. Galore for incomplete homework or general mischievousness. Racist teachers who had no credentials being allowed to work there. My parents were told that me learning or even speaking Spanish would cause me to be held back mentally by an equally mental teacher. My mom brought my dad and both asked the teacher to explain herself to the principal, whose eyes were apparently wide as dinner plates when she found out. Principal apparently didn't fire her that day, but later she did, to unrelated reasons. Same teacher put me across the same table as this piece of crap who was the worst bully in the school. Not sure if it was revenge for what parents did, but it's likely knowing her. I was good at school, but at same teacher's class, I would struggle to keep up. I almost got held back a year because I nearly failed that class. Parents transferred me to a different school because this was the last straw. I wound up excelling at this school and got a really high GPA, the highest I had ever gotten at that time. There were a few positive experiences I had with other students, the most memorable being that I made my entire class laugh for a solid 15 minutes for an oral book report that I did, including my crush. Best feeling ever. Was 5YO when this happened. Our school had a very strict code of conduct when it came to announcements and speeches over the loudspeaker. For some reason we had afternoon announcements followed with prayer. When the announcements were being said, we all had to stand up regardless of what we're doing, listen and put our hands together to pray. Being 5, we followed the rule to the T and were scared of the consequences if we didn't. In our classroom we had our own bathroom and everyone took turns using it whenever they wanted, except when the announcements were going. It'd be my luck that I had to go really badly when the announcements were on and my bladder is full to bursting. Sister Butthole sees me shuffling to the bathroom and wiggling around doing the pee-pee dance and yells for me to be still and wait. Prayer comes around and I can't wait anymore. I'm relieving myself on the classroom floor saying praising God with more enthusiasm than all of my peers. Our Father, who art in heaven, give us this day our daily bread. Sorry, it's not much of a horror story, but that was my last year in Catholic school. My brother has worse stories of going to the La Salle and the happenings of that school. I went to a private Lutheran school K8. Pretty horrible experience. I was fortunate enough that my family could scrounge up tuition money for me to attend, and I did get a great education, but being the poor kid and overweight really put me at the center of a lot of bullying. I didn't have any friends and would get bullied over the stupidest things every day. No violence, but classmates and even some teachers would just be really cruel about things. From having discount school supplies to used worn clothes. We would have to go to church every day and memorize Bible verses, and when I said I thought it was dumb we had to memorize stuff to a classmate one time, I got detention for a week. Got ostracized for an entire semester once for having dollar store tissues when we had to donate school supplies for the classrooms. It made me chronically depressed as early as 3rd grade. I went to the public high school after and was so glad. Made friends, did well in classes, and overall my life was much easier and happier. The education I got was phenomenal, but I won't ever be putting my future kids in private school. I have plenty, but the thing that really gets to me is the physical abuse. One of my teachers physically assaulted me and ended up penning me to the ground, and he only got a slap on the wrist. Ended up becoming principal after I had left. Oh, and when my dad gave me a black eye and a concussion, all my teachers said I must have deserved it. Cherry on top of the crap sundae is that lately my dad's been casually mentioning how he thinks it's okay for teachers to assault kids and how he should have hit me more often. I think he does it because he knows how much it gets to me, but he's been spending a lot of time with people associated with that institution and I think they're encouraging that type of thinking. Oh, and the local paper just did a profile on how much they help the community. Made me want to vomit. You should punch your dad square in the face one day and then ask him how he feels about it. Wish I'd done that to my abusive father, but unfortunately he's gone now. I went to a private Christian school from 1st to 8th grade. It's not much of a horror story, but I remember being shown a video where a man giving a presentation tried to argue the age of the earth as only being 10,000 years old. It was an attempt at joining creationism in the book of Genesis to an actual time span in a scientific context. Obviously, once you learn about the speed of light and what can be seen in the observable universe, you realize how fast that argument falls apart. I went to a state-funded nominally Church of England school in the day, but for 2 hours every weekday afternoon I was sent to a madrasa, which is customary among Muslim families. We sat and read the Quran and did nothing else. The teacher liked groping women on buses, but he kept that part of himself away from the madrasa. He subjected us to a lot though. He had a bit of wood from a chair that he used to hit us with if we pronounced anything wrong. Sometimes he used a bit of hose. He'd hit us on the backs of our hands and the soles of our feet. He'd make us stand like a chair against a wall for ages, or give us the chicken punishment where we'd have to hold our ears with our arms passed around our legs. Sometimes when someone was in that position he'd beat them across the back with timber. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. It's not your fault. He should be doing time in prison. I went to a Catholic school. I am from a Protestant background, so a lot of things in school confused me. Heck, why pray to saints? Aren't they just human and they can't hear us? Why do we have to learn prayers by heart? Prayer is how we talk to God, so it doesn't need to be scripted. I asked these questions and the only answer I ever got was that's just how we do things here. I was unconvinced and left catechism class when I was 7. Fast forward a couple years and it's time for my sister to get into school. They denied her admission and refused to tell us why. My maternal uncle is a Catholic priest, so we got him to ask the bishop to find out why they didn't let her get an admission. It was because Remisu hated on the Catholic faith and opposed it when she was 7. I didn't. I just respectfully requested to not follow those traditions for myself, and never stopped anyone else from doing it their way. Never hated on anyone. Never oppose people in that way. I was also a generally very good student and all my teachers liked me. I'm still sour about this. So essentially, we do not want critical thinkers in school. I actually have answers to your first few questions if you still want them. I realize you aren't 7 anymore. I went to the same Christian school from kindergarten through 11th grade. I learned very quickly that my school experience was very different from kids that went to public school. Up until 8th grade I actually didn't have many issues there. I wasn't a great student because I don't learn the way they taught and there was no help or understanding for that kind of thing. I had one principal for 1 year that understood me very well and he would give me verbal tests that I'd do fine with. He unfortunately passed away the next year. I grew up with most of the people in the school, so teasing wasn't really a thing. There were only 10-18 people in my class each year. Things got weird in high school because they got stricter about male-female interactions. Girls couldn't sit next to boys on the floor. Dating was strongly discouraged. Our school dances generally didn't have any slow songs because they didn't want to encourage boys and girls getting that close. My junior year we spent every weekly chapel listening to our principal read a book about courting for marriage. I Kissed Dating Goodbye. The author has actually publicly spoken against his own book now. We never had sex ed because the only option was abstinence. I know a kid that was asked to leave because he was openly gay. I know a girl that was asked to leave because they found out she drank on weekends. They didn't expel kids, just requested they leave. I know another kid that was suspended for 6 weeks when they found out he was sexually active, which would effectively make him fail that year due to so much missed time. After his parents went to the headmaster for guidance on the situation. After I left I know other kids were asked to leave due to becoming pregnant and the guys that got them pregnant were also asked to leave. The whole abstinence thing clearly took Since I wasn't a good student, I literally did not matter to the teachers or principal. My best friend had a lot of mental health problems, so I was put in charge of her because no one wanted to know how to deal with it. However, the principal basically tried to blackmail my best friend and said for her to go to our version of prom. With her boyfriend, she needed to make me get my grades up. My parents even had meetings with the principal to specifically request that if I fell behind in my classes that they be contacted to intervene. They called my parents in May and told them I would be failing my entire year. Dropping out and getting my GED was the easiest and best decision I've ever made for myself. I started college before the rest of my peers and have a bachelor's degree now. My friends from that school are either atheists or special holiday churchgoers now. I'd recommend the grade school for a solid education, but junior high through high school I'd say run as far away as you can. It was a terrible school, but I have lifelong friends. We are in our 30s now, from there with a pretty unique bond. I love that Christians push abstinence only when their religion is based on it not working. This was in high school. The music teacher wanted the girls to perform a very suggestive song about a schoolgirl. 2 months later he was arrested for pedophilia in Sunday school. My high school never addressed that. I have a friend who went to a religious school. At the time, she was 15. The teacher, male, whenever my friend did something wrong, would make her sit attention and he would tell her that she is possessed because she made a mistake. Then he would lock them both in a small classroom and he would ahem touch her in ways that aren't supposed to be felt by a 15-year-old girl for half an hour. This would repeat every time she makes a mistake. She is 24 now and has severe paranoia. We had the father of a 4th grader at our school shoot her, his other daughter and himself. The school was so strange for a few weeks. Lunchroom was silent, no bullying, which in middle school was a rarity. The bitchy social studies teacher sobbed and said if anyone tried to hurt any of us she would not let them. The mom's only request was all the students sing at her daughter's funeral. Nobody missed that funeral. The rare time I have to attend mass when my folks visit, the mom is there, every time. She wears a pin with a picture of her daughters on it. I still remember the younger daughter walking along the halls. Most of my private school time was fine, other than the typical small class sizes mean they can only teach to the middle of the road students and I was incredibly bored all the time. However, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that private school teachers don't have to be certified to teach in a lot of states. Normally a lot of them are. My science teachers in middle school were not. One year, my science teacher was the dad of one of my classmates. He was the definition of chaotic who thought that all science needed to be taught via experiments. While sometimes that was fun, other times it led to interesting scenarios. The most horrific was when he wanted us to dissect fish. He went out and got all the fish from wherever. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a place you're supposed to get fish for dissection from, because following those rules didn't comply with who he was as a person. And then he was supposed to make sure all the fish were dead before we started our dissection. He did not. Fast forward to students cutting into still living, but barely, fish that started flopping everywhere as soon as they were cut into and spraying blood on some of the students. It was a mess, and may have been the reason several of those kids were vegetarian after that day. TLDR. Science teacher didn't make sure fish were dead before dissection. Blood everywhere. New vegetarians were made that day. This is the funniest freaking thing. Thanks for a break from all the depressing stories. Probably sex ed. My school wasn't overly religious and it claimed to encourage religious freedom, but forced everyone to learn that long but God poem and go to church and sing hymns in our Friday assemblies. The teachers were incredibly religious. So, year 6 sex education, a room full of young impressionable girls, a teacher who didn't know what she was doing. Sex is when a man and a woman cuddle very close together. Screw gay people. Screw people who like rough sex. Screw most people. They eventually told us how it worked, but phrased it in a way that led the whole class to think that the man started ejaculating as soon as he was inside and that he only pulled out once he thought she was pregnant. There was nothing on consent, nothing on female orgasms, nothing on pleasure, very little on STDs. Basically it was a shit show. I have more stories about that place but they don't really belong on a serious thread. I went to a small private Christian school from 6th 8th grade. Ever see the movie Jesus Camp? This school was an exact copy of that. Pentecostal teachings, with weekly worship services where little kids were speaking in tongues and falling over and all that. It was nuts. Yes, the principal called Harry Potter the devil. I don't know how I managed to survive through 3 years of that place. Obviously, I have plenty of stories. It was a boarding school. Try going months without the internet, TV, cell phones, or talking to girls. 1. We weren't allowed to lock our doors out of fear we might masturbate or something, so our crap can get stolen at any time. We had to keep our money locked up in the office. 2. We had to tell people where we were going and when we will be back. Keep in mind we were there 24/7. 3. Very strict dress code 24/7. 4. Food gave me diarrhea. 5. There was no nurse, so if you got sick you needed to pay for a cab to take you to a doctor and use your parents' insurance. 6. So much freaking prayer all the time. 7. Long freaking hours. I went to boarding school as well. Gonna answer anyway. I went to a public school a long time ago in a very rural part of a southern state. It might as well have been a Baptist run school. We sang hymns. We memorized and recited psalms. We prayed every morning. We may have had a Methodist old lady teacher or two, and I was the sole Presbyterian. Everyone else was some flavor of Baptist or another. My 6th grade math teacher had at one time been a high school teacher. He didn't really like teaching and he was more of an athletic coach. When he didn't feel like teaching math, he would teach us Bible stories instead, and more or less conduct Sunday school in the classroom. He would also sit on the front of the desk at the front of the class and he would always adjust his junk. Not just a quick tweak, he would grab in there through his hanger slacks and move stuff around until he was comfortable. Every time, right at our level for all of us seated at our desks. Years later, I mentioned to my older sister that he had been busted for molesting underage girls. My sister had him as a high school teacher. Her reaction was just, HMMPH. About time. Middle school teachers of Reddit. What is the most awkward cringy thing you've seen a student do? I used to teach middle school before graduating to teach high school. While I was in middle school I had one awkward student in my last period that took a liking to me. He would stay after school every day just to hang out with me. He was always asking how he could help out after class, like cleaning the whiteboard, putting chairs up, that sort of thing. We would usually talk while he did this. One day he surprised me by saying, "I bet you'd be a really good dad. I think it would be awesome if you were my dad." Think of all the things we could do. I kind of laughed it off, because middle schoolers say a lot of weird thing. A couple of weeks go by, same thing. He's staying after school to hang out with me when he says, "You know you have a conference with my mom tomorrow, yeah?" Of course. She's really cute. You'll like her. What? Maybe you guys can go out on a date. Needless to say, that was an awkward conference. AWW, I actually feel quite sorry for the kid. I had a kid once ask if I could be her mother. She was only 7, so I suppose it's less of an awkward situation than a middle schooler. But she broke my heart, as I knew that her parents always got home late and she'd go home to an empty house at such a young age. Recently I've been finding condom wrappers in the desks of my 6th graders. Apparently the boys have been using them to masturbate in the bathrooms. The most cringy part about it was a girl student pointed to the desk and said, "You might want to check this out, but I don't even know what them lil boys be doing with those. It's not like they can use them yet." Especially as a first year teacher, this has been one of the most awkward days of my job. I had a 7th grade girl raise her hand and ask me to come to her desk. When I leaned over she asked quietly if she could go to the bathroom and gestured at her lap and muttered something I didn't hear, assuming that she started her period. Fortunately in dark black pants, I let her leave of course. When she comes back, she stands next to her chair for the rest of the lecture and leaves quietly at the bell. Next class comes in, and, while I'm straightening up and standing in the hallway, the student who was assigned the same seat as that girl grabs some paper towels and starts cleaning up. There is a huge puddle in the chair and on the floor. It suddenly occurs to me, the dense teacher, that this poor girl had peed her pants. In 7th grade, I told the boy that someone spilled their tea water and tried to get him to stop cleaning it up, but he was like, "Nope, already done." He had just mopped up some girl's pee. I told him to wash his hands in case the tea was sticky and let it go. I asked the girl the next day if everything was okay. She was so amazed that nobody even noticed. Thank goodness for unobservant teachers and students that day. But watching that boy clean up pee has haunted me. He was almost done when I realized what was going on. But still. Great reaction as a teacher though. You handled that very well. This school year one of my students bet another student something like $20 to lick his ballsack. The boy agreed and decided that after a sweaty day in gym class in the locker room would be the best time to do it, which he did. They also had a third boy there to film it on their phone of course, so now they are all suspended pending potential charges for making and distributing child pornography. As a result, our district attorney came and gave an assembly presentation of laws pertaining to sexting and underage sex to all of our kids. I think half of them started crapping bricks when they were told that they could potentially gain access to their past Snapchats. Could potentially gain access to their past Snapchats. That's a good bluff. There was a student. Kinda flamboyant. Nice kid and super social. Too social for a lot of middle schoolers. He wrote an erotic story that included himself and 3 other students. It was found when he dropped a page of it in English class and one of the students saw their name and started reading it. It was very, very detailed. That worst part was that each of the students who were written about and their parents were informed and shown the story. And somehow it got out. The English teacher at the time said it was a good read and had no grammatical errors. A 6th grade boy called another boy gay. That boy responded by saying, "I'm not gay. If I was gay I'd be touching your balls right now." How to leave your opponent speechless in an argument. I watched one of my students break apart an eraser. You know, the big pink kind, and then proceed to put all the pieces in her mouth and fire them out like a gun at the boy sitting next to her. When I asked her why, she told me it was because she wanted to be his friend. Kids. I think she misunderstood the advice about using a rubber with your crush. The most common cringe-inducing activity is the Naruto run. Every year there are still 4-5 boys that exclusively travel through the halls with their arms raised behind them. Second place is when kids say a joke and no one hears them, or they don't pick up the social cue that no one thought it was funny, so they say it like 10 more times. Hey, that's a spicy meatball. No response. Hey, that's a spicy meatball. 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 Meanwhile, I'm going insane at my desk with my teacher ears that hear everything. Someone, for the love of God, please answer him. I've made it part of my job as 5th grade teacher to inform my kids on how to make a joke. Part of it is that you can't repeat it, because jokes have to be a surprise. So now they police each other on it, to the point that other teachers have told me my kids shut down the let's say the same crap over and over cycle in other rooms. This isn't one instance, it's just daily. My students draw dongs on everything. It's almost like in the movie Superbad. I legit have a collection of dong drawings ranging from stick figures to scientific journal quality. I was out for personal reasons for 3 days. When I came back, the kids had drawn dongs on the back of all our computers with Sharpies. It's like they are obsessed. And before you ask, I save the pictures for evidence in case I need to use them in a parent-teacher meeting. That, and they make me laugh really hard. It's always a good idea to save hard evidence. One girl made a fake boyfriend using some Arabic movie star as the profile pic. When her friends found out, it was one epic cat fight in the yard. She went through all the effort of creating fake Facebook canvas of her talking to herself. She actually logged into 2 separate accounts at the same time to create convincing conversation to show her friends. My wife works as a 7th grade ELA teacher. There is a kid in her school that everyone is afraid of, including teachers. He has very morbid thoughts and has no issues sharing them with everyone. When classmates share how their weekend went, he discusses how he loves killing people in his video games and how good he is at doing it, etc. A few weeks ago on a Monday, said student returns my wife a loaner pen that was given out. "Thank you," she says. To which he replies, "No thank you. I've slept with it under my pillow all weekend because it smells like you." He has since been assigned a new ELA teacher that is actually across the hall, and since then he had to get his desk moved in that classroom because he would be caught. staring into my wife's classroom for the entire class. A bonus fact, they had parent-teacher conferences and his single-parent father is equally as sketched out by his own son. I used to teach 7th grade science in a school with fairly low-level students, so reading skills weren't particularly sharp. As we're about to get into the differences between living and non-living things, it was time to cover some new terminology, so I had a student read a paragraph from the textbook aloud to the class. It went something like this. There are all kinds of orgasms in the world. Big orgasms, small orgasms, even microscopic orgasms. Some orgasms have fur, some orgasms have scales, and even you are an orgasm. Not a single student knew any different, or at least didn't make a big deal out of it, but I was about to die with laughter. I went into the hallway to compose myself, then read the second paragraph myself. An organism is a living thing, which can be defined as. Funny that none of the kids caught on. A kid did something similar in my 7th grade class and we were all crying with laughter. The poor kid never lived it down. My wife is a 4th grade teacher and she tells me stories all the time, but this one almost made me throw up. She was teaching and started to smell crap and thought, alright, someone is just farting. No biggie. After a few minutes the kids all started making faces cause they smelled it too. Finally one kid caught my wife's attention and had crap in his hands while sitting at his desk. Turned out he obviously farted and crap his pants but decided to stick his hand in his pants because he didn't believe what happened and didn't know what to do with it cause he was clearly embarrassed. My wife had to call the custodian to clean up the area. Let me tell you, the crap these custodians do on a daily basis is incredible. They're the real heroes. Turned out he obviously farted and crap his pants. Happens to the best of us. A Jewish friend of mine with no Reddit account. I was teaching, and it wasn't even about the Holocaust. I actually don't remember what it was about. The kid raised his hand and asked randomly, "You're Jewish, right?" And I said, "Yes." "Why?" And then he said, "Oh wow, I bet you're glad that Hitler's dead." Not me, but my mom is a middle school choir teacher, and one day I was visiting her class to see her kids sing and bring her a coffee. After I give my mom her coffee, I go and sit down in an empty chair in the middle of all her kids just to listen to them sing and do warm-ups. The girl on my right and I say hello to each other, and I glance over to the left to see the girl sitting on the other side of me staring me down. Before I could say anything, she blinks and says, "I have lung problems," and then turns to face the front of the classroom again. That is, to this day, one of the strangest things that has ever happened to me. I'd be game to deal with that one. "I have lung problems." Turns away. I lean towards her. "Ah, that's a shame. Been dealing with a case of the night peas myself lately. Usually it's just once, but some nights I'm up to visit the John 2-3 times. Age is a funny thing." I turn back to the front. Taught as an assistant. During an English verbal exam, students must ask the proctor a question. One boy asked if I liked him. In Japanese, it could be both, "Do you consider me a worthwhile human being?" and "Would you bang?" sort of like, erring on the side of caution, so as not to call a potentially depressed student worthless. I went with yes. He fixed the problem right away by asking me why, and I promptly told him because I didn't hate him. He got the point. When I was a teacher, a Japanese student asking if my white boyfriend had big penis. When I was a student, girl who would make up ridiculous stories for attention. She claimed that someone tried to shoot her once and a bird flew in front and took the bullet for her. Weird stuff like that. Watch her have lived some amazing life full of divine intervention only for no one to believe her stories. Kills herself. We had a new teacher in middle school, and I won't lie, he was fine. He was young and very handsome, and the girls were all hitting puberty at that time. One girl took it to an extreme though. She would scream at him, "Will you marry me, Mr. Clark? You're so freaking sexy, you're so hot, Mr. Clark, kiss me." It was so incredibly awkward. I felt so badly for him. Come to think of it, actually that girl ended up transferring schools, so there must have been some serious talk going on with her parents about it. That poor teacher must have been terrified, lol. I remember that period. There was this teacher that every guy in the school has a crush on at some point. And it didn't help that everyone was frisky AF all the time, being in the peak of puberty. Long story short, some very awkward things happened that year. Edit. Added long story long in comments. You were warned. Student would sit in the back and mutter Kamehameha, sometimes for 20 minutes. He also insisted on being called Goku. We labeled his behavior charts to start at baby Goku and advance to Super Saiyan level 4. He never made it past teenage Goku. I mean, by that time he'd already defeated the Red Ribbon Army and saved the world from King Piccolo. That's quite a lot for a middle schooler to accomplish in a year, Imo. Well, there was that time that a 7th grade boy decided to put his open mouth on my office window and swirl his tongue around, Minox style. Best thing you can do is not react. Just sigh deeply, walk up, and calmly ask if they're done yet. I was teaching 7th grade math. My kids had all done really well on a recent test and I asked them for suggestions for a class reward. Kids starting shouting out ideas. Chips, pizza, candy out of the back of the room. A kid who normally is pretty quiet yells out, "Let's get boners." The class loses it. They all start laughing while the kid who yelled is repeating, "I meant donuts. I meant to say donuts." It took a good 10 minutes to get control of the room back. Kid was pretty embarrassed, but I did my duty and managed not to laugh. Stopped taking reward suggestions after that. That kid is going to be reliving that moment every night as he tries to fall asleep for the next 70 years. Worked at an all-girls middle school in Korea for 3 years. Saw a girl proceed to walk out the bathroom with her used feminine pad and proceed to slap the girl that was bullying her. Not just once but multiple times. It was pretty messy. Witnessed a hilariously cringy moment last Friday while supervising an 8th grade lunch. I watched as a student, let's call her Mia, arrived to the table she normally sits at and set her tray down. In that moment there was a discussion that another boy had already taken that spot and he had just run up to grab something. Instantly tears fill her eyes and she snatches her tray to head across the lunchroom to a different table. Mia gets about 5 steps away when a boy, Chad, from the table goes Mia. Wait, my heart filled as I imagined some act of kindness, some reminder that 8th graders are actual human. Mia turns with a Medusa-like glare and shouts what Chad points to her tray and asks, "Are you going to drink your milk?" Freaking Chads. I only listen to old school hip hop. My favorite group is NWA. I bet you've never even heard of them. This was said to me. I had to stop myself from laughing in this kid's face. Source: I'm an actual teacher. Someone had done this to me about Nirvana. Kid, when I was your age, Kurt Cobain was at the height of his fame. During Black History Month, we were assigned to create a PowerPoint document on an historical black person. Then, we all had to present them on a projector to the class. Around halfway through the presentations is a kid named Travis who was assigned Malcolm X. He loads up his presentation on the projector, and the title page features a chimpanzee. Odd, but maybe there is something to it. Nope. Straight-faced, he delivered every page of his entire presentation replete with photos of baboons, monkeys, bananas, and culminating in a photo of a gorilla and a large animated gun pointed at its head going bang like in cartoons. This, of course, being the assassination of X. I watched this teacher the entire time. She turned redder and redder as he went on. Finally, at the slide with the gun and gorilla, she exploded on him. I don't remember exactly what she said, but this usually demure teacher went into a rage, yanking him into the hall and presumably to the office. If you're wondering, yes, there was a black student, and no, it was not Travis. It's been so long that I don't recall her reaction, but it must have been awful. I can't for the life of me understand why the teacher let him go on for so long. I can't for the life of me understand why the teacher let him go on for so long. Letting him dig his own hole, I assume. Turning detention into suspension into explosion with every slide. There was this kid that nobody really talked to. He was talkative, but every time he tried to start a conversation, it seemed like he was just white noise to other students. Usually I would be sympathetic, but he was a little too weird. He was massive for a middle schooler and was already growing lots of stubble that he refused to shave, and every day he would walk into class, turn on Russian polka at full volume, and do an Eastern European dance. Every day, without fail. Not only this, but he exclusively spoke in a Russian accent. and everyone knew he was not Russian whatsoever. He also wore a massive fur hat every day, even when it was not cold. He's gone now, but I wonder what's going to happen to him in high school. Rasputin's reincarnation. A sub, who was a pretty younger woman, said that when she was walking up and down the rows checking on student work, she noticed a boy was playing with himself. The principal met with the mother and the actual teacher of the class to discuss it. The mother insisted that her son could not have possibly been doing that because his penis was far too small to be able to be seen. Mother just got absolutely destroyed in his time of need. Taught 6th grade. Had a boy come up to me and swipe his hand up my neck while saying infinity. My naive teacher self-uncomfortably laughed that he just touched my neck and asked what infinity means. The amount of dongs you've sucked. I'm not working there anymore. Not a teacher, but during woodshop class, our teacher asked the class if we knew how to glaze wood. A boy jokingly whispered to his friend, "Skeet on it, ha ha ha." An innocent girl who heard the boy's joke raised her hand, was called on, and proudly answered, "Skeet on it." In a class that was 80-90% male, she was the only one who didn't get what was so funny. Full disclosure, this happened in a freshman class, but it was definitely awkward. I would definitely lose my crap at that as a freshman. Heck, I'd probably laugh at it now. That's hilarious. A child diva bombed in from behind and kissed me on the cheek while I was sitting. That was super strange. Another child's pants ended up falling all the way off while he was in his chair. His bare butt was on the seat. I looked at him and raised my eyebrows, turned around, and the next time I glanced at him his pants were back on. SHHHH. No one will believe you. My wife taught in a middle school. She's pretty petite, 5'2", so she could blend in with the student populace if she wasn't careful. Walking in the hall one day, a 7th grade boy walks by her and goes, "Dang girl, that butt is looking fine." It probably was. When she wheeled around to face him and he saw her titches badge, he just about crap himself. She didn't get him in trouble BC. It was such an insane circumstance that she felt a little bad for him and how mortified he was. She was just kind of like, "I don't need to tell you how bad you just messed up, right?" He was just pleadingly saying, "I am so sorry." She let him off with a, "You really need to respect women more than that." When I myself was in 8th grade, we were in history class and being monstrous to the teacher, talking over her, not paying attention, etc. She finally loses her patience and flips out on us. She said something along the lines of, "What can I do to make you guys pay attention?" Everyone in my stories speaks in caps lock, to which my friend Logan replied, "You can't take off your pants." Logan Paul started young. I have a boy this year who regularly does things that ultimately just results in him embarrassing himself to get attention. This includes what his class refers to as duck noises, somewhere between a loud forced exhale and a grunt. He regularly and loudly yells at other students for looking at him. Everything is funny, like head back, loud, literally falling out of his seat onto the floor laughing funny, even if it's just that someone's coat fell off its hook. Perhaps the worst, he lay on the floor and pretended to be a chicken, arms flailing, loud squawking, some semblance of an attempt at the worm but sideways. He tried to do a flip in the schoolyard one day and landed on his arm. I had him next, and he spent the first 10 minutes of my class dramatically wailing my shoulder as if he was attempting, badly, to imitate a woman in labor. Had mom come pick him up. He came back the next day with a sling and claimed his shoulder was dislocated, but I saw his doing flips in the yard again that afternoon. Not a teacher, but this happened during 8th grade. Some girl, a known class disruptor, brought a vibrator to school. It was one of the ones that had buttons for sounds, and during math class, one of the buttons was accidentally pushed while inside her bag. Suddenly, everyone heard OHH. Yes, followed by a little jingle sound inside the classroom. She got in big trouble after that. First day back at school after Christmas this year, I was talking with my Year 7 form class about how their Christmas went. I mentioned at one point that I was still feeling tired from the early start, and one girl piped up with, "I'm so tired too, sir. I wish you could take me back to bed." I know she just meant that she wanted to go back to sleep, but frick. That was the most cringy thing I've ever encountered. Just lucky that no one else realized what she said. What was the weirdest thing the weird kid did at school? For elementary school, I was that weird kid. I didn't talk until I was 5, and when I started, I had maybe a 20-word vocabulary and only spoke when spoken to for about 3 to 4 years. But at age 5, when I just started to talking, the local 10-year-old genius who was also our neighbor, was actually a genius, graduated at 12 or something close, walked up to me and said, "The answer to every question can be found through observing," and then walked off. That's it. That is all he said. I, on the other hand, was, and still am, an absolute idiot. What I interpreted from what he said was, the answer to every question is observing. Now, I knew this kid had the smarts I didn't have, so I took what he said very seriously and unfortunately very literally. My parents were freaking out. My school had to call my parents multiple times and eventually we had a big meeting. That ended up landing me in therapy because for nearly a solid year, the only thing I ever said to anyone was observing. 2x2 equals observing. What do you want for tea observing? What is on the TV observing? Why the heck are you such a stupid fricking kid observing? That's frickin' hilarious. In high school, this kid would regularly pick his nose and eat it in class. He was also caught masturbating to girls in the school library and on a school bus. He got suspended for a week and had to register as a sex offender. This story escalated quickly from the nose picking. He heard that you'd automatically get suspended if you peed your pants at school. He wanted to find out if it was true, peed his pants, got suspended. At my middle school, someone decided to get a little attention with a good old-fashioned bomb threat, except they thought that a bomb threat meant literally writing bomb threat somewhere. Worse yet, they misspelled the frick out of it and wrote boom threat. So we had to go on a brief, very awkward lockdown while the police checked the perimeter for booms. Had a kid nicknamed Cheeseburger in the grade ahead of me in high school. He got his nickname because when it was time for his class to go to lunch, he snuck into the roof and crawled his way into the cafeteria, dropped down and proceeded to steal all the cheeseburger put out for lunch. Unfortunately, they caught him in the act and sent him to the principal's office. A year later he was caught stealing a teacher's computer, and in the process of being arrested he bit the officer's hand, getting him sent to juvie never to be heard of again. We had a guy who wore a dragon tail, believing he was a dragon, and same story for a different guy, but his thing was wearing a cat bell. There were lots of rumors about the cat bell guy. Go on. He would say very obscure elements on the periodic table and start singing about it as if it were his friend. We were like 7/8. Jumping on the giant Christmas tree from the second floor balcony. That was the last time they put a Christmas tree on our school. His locker only ever had 3 things in it: his American flag cape, one of those foldable Razor scooters, and a box turtle. MF went to school with Oliver Tree. Showing us a video he uploaded to YouTube of him cutting his poop in half with a hanger as it was laying in the toilet bowl. Homemade poop knife. He got mad that he didn't understand how to play a game at lunchtime, so he started hitting and punching the nearest person to him, who happened to be me. When I shoved him away and asked him what the heck was he doing, he whipped his dong out, charged at me, and when I shoved him away from me again he started crying and ran away with his member still sticking out. In first grade there was this kid who stood by the sink in the back of the classroom eating bits of those brown paper towels. The teacher was constantly telling him to stop eating them and go back to his seat. She wrote a list of all the girls and boys she wanted to kiss and murder and then casually passed it out on the playground. He didn't say much, but if asked, he would go to the front of the class and perform tiptoe through the tulips with all of the emotion and volume of Tiny Tim, holding nothing back. Now he is on Broadway. Weird kid in elementary was a self-proclaimed alien. Once, while waiting for the bus, she told me on my planet we eat people like you and proceeded to bite me. We later became friends in high school and she used to give me massages during lunch break in the quad. I just realized now she was likely tenderizing me. Had the weird kid in high school ask the teacher to use the bathroom. She said no and this dude legit stabbed his hand with a pencil. Went all the way through then asked if he could now. Crap was wild. Related story, but this girl wasn't a weird kid. She asked to use the bathroom during a class with a male teacher. He said no and told her to hold it. She straight up, in front of the entire class said, "I cannot hold the blood from pouring out of my vagina," got up, and left the classroom anyway. LOL, had this weird kid in my class who was otherwise okay but just would do really unexplainable stuff. He once opened his lunchbox in class and threw the contents right onto the overhead ceiling fan. It was something liquidy and greenish. Hit the spinning fan. Splashed down all over us. The walls. The board. The poor teacher got the worst rain down on his face. As a punishment, the entire class was made to clean the classroom. Surprisingly, we were not mad at him, we all had a real good laugh at it. When the teacher told him to sit down, he screamed, "Frick you cow." Fast forward 2 years, he tells everyone he's a vampire and stabs my friend with a pen to try to make him bleed. He was weird like. Sounds like your friend could have used some chainmail. Sharpened a pencil super sharp, muzzle loaded it into the recorder, covered all the holes and blowgunned it at another kid. The pencil went between his eyeball and socket, so fortunately he kept his sight. Similarly, after I switched schools, this happened before I arrived so I didn't actually see it, a girl used blue tack to stick a short and very sharp pencil on a kid's seat. He sat on it and it punctured the skin right next to his butthole, then perforated his rectum. Needed emergency surgery. Said absolutely nothing to anyone besides "I like cows" for about a month. Anything you said to him, regardless of the context or situation, "I like cows." We had a kid like that, except it was turtles. Also super into "What does the fox say?" which was already a little weird. Ended up transferring. The list is endless, but one incident sticks out in my mind. The boy was getting told off by the teacher, and instead of taking it on the chin, he decided to jump on the table, shout "I'm out of here," and proceed to run full pelt into a steel beam that was supporting the roof. Knocked himself out cold. Was a fun lesson by all accounts. Shout "I'm out of here," and by here he meant this plane of existence. One girl used to run gallop around the playground on her own, pretending she was a horse. This is at too old an age for the rest of us to be doing this. Think 14/15. She got a medicine degree and is doing her surgical training at the moment. I bumped into her in the hospital after over a decade. All I could think of to say was, "Do you still love horses?" She laughed and said she had her own horse now. Figures. There was this pair of boys in the year above me in high school who used to make dirt bike noises everywhere they went. Lasted months. You'd randomly hear them coming down the stairs. Bwah. He once asked me to play spies with him, knowing he didn't play with many people. I said yes. He took me on a mission around the school, before coming to a stop in front of bushes, pulling his pants all the way down and then started peeing in the bushes. At that point I was out. He drove around the basketball courts, following the lines, on an imaginary bus. He'd stop to let people get on off the bus and then drive them to their stops, and we walked in a line behind him. When he stopped walking, he'd mimic the door opening and closing and wouldn't let you on off if you didn't wait for the signal. Salutations, Ben the bus driver. I hope you achieved your dreams. To clear it up, this was in Australia and he was between the ages of 8-13 when I knew him. We all got on the bus because when no one did, he'd drive around looking sad. He did this all the time, not once and not sporadically. Anytime he was outside, he was imitating a bus driver. Sounds like that one game in a gym where it was tagged but you could only follow the painted lines. He brought a blow-up doll to our farewell dance senior prom in the USA as his date, complete with fishnets and everything. He definitely got laid that night. In 4th grade, one kid got so angry at something, maybe the work we were doing, he gripped his pencil as hard as he could, started yelling, moaning, and stuck the sharp end of the pencil square into his forehead. You know how there's horse girls? This girl was obsessed with babies, like being a mom or even acting like a baby. I already knew her as the weird girl, then I got paired up with her for a semester as lab partners. Let me tell you, she was so much weirder than I thought. Constant questions about if I wanted to be a mom too and my body. She always had a pacifier with her and would constantly chew or suck on it. She would switch between mommy days and baby days. Like one day she would come in and act like a mother, talk about her baby in extreme detail. Other days she would come in and just baby talk. It was so cringy. Things got significantly worse when she found out I was a babysitter. After that she became obsessed with me. I dated the weird kid in high school, and even a few years after him the weirdest thing he did was try to date his cousin while we were together. He also ate grass and him and his friends would talk about the flesh planet. I hated my life back then. Can't believe I couldn't get a date in high school. A kid had a wank in the back of the classroom and thought it was funny, ejaculated on his desk. 14 or 15, it was like he discovered fire. We had one of those kids. We shared multiple classes, but in art he showed the girl sitting next to him his dong and she called it small. He was destroyed and it was the funniest thing I can remember. She blew her nose into her hand and then licked it while looking me in the eyes. She actually wasn't too weird aside from that. I have no idea WTF it was. I just turned to the noise and saw that. Just a girl shooting her shot or snooting her snot. One boy was once caught eating grass. When asked why, he said, "I always wanted to be a cow." I think he turned out fine, but it was weird. The weird kid at my high school tied a string around his pencil case and pulled out around the halls pretending it was a dog. He still lives in my hometown. I think unemployed. Oh, also weird girl in middle school acted like a cat. She would meow and hiss at people, lick the water fountain and rub her body on the teacher's legs. In 8th grade, I have no idea where she ended up. In elementary school I was the weird kid. I stacked all the chairs in my classroom like a pyramid. I got away with this because my school opened up early to let kids in. We were supposed to be in the cafeteria. I know my class was left unlocked. Not the first time I snuck out of the cafeteria to look around unsupervised and get away from other people. It took me about 45 minutes. Only like 15 kids in that class, so not a lot of chairs. I thought it was the funniest thing ever at the time. Everyone else did not. I still get a slight chuckle out of it. Still kind of weird. I actually stacked lots of different things and often in places or into shapes they probably shouldn't be. 3rd grade. Whipped his dong out while we were sitting on the mat. Did not say anything, just sat there as the teacher processed what was happening. Okay, so I had a kid at my school. Not particularly bad, but just annoyed the everything out of me. Because I was the only one nice to him. He would follow me everywhere. Randomly grab me for no reason. Hug me and not give me any personal space. But here comes the worst part. We have school swimming lessons, and you could either get changed in the change rooms or the toilets showers. Since I am a shy person, I would always use the showers to get changed. Figures he followed me in there, got dressed outside my door, and just when I was leaving my cubicle, he was just there, dancing naked. I died inside that day. This is giving me strong Fragley from Diary of a Wimpy Kid vibes, lol. He always wore a cape to school, and if anyone ever talked to him about it he would be so upset because it's called a cloak, not a cape. I wore a cloak to high school pretty regularly, but no one questioned it because I went to a pretty weird and nerdy small school. Special day off of school for Comic Con. Shakespeare competition was the most popular sports style nerdy school. My old art teacher told our class a bunch of stories about weird things kids did in her class through the years before she retired. Before she worked at our school, she worked as an English teacher at the juvenile court school. All of the kids there had issues, but there was this one kid who really stuck out to her. She was assigned to teach him, but the catch was that he had to be in solitary in order to be taught. She was also told that he needed to be watched at all times because he always tried to escape class, and usually was successful. When she taught him, there was a guard posted at the door. The windows were locked and boarded up, and the door was kept locked. The only things in the room were his desk, his chair, and her desk, so that he couldn't hide either. Apparently he was also extremely good at that. The first time she had to teach this kid, they were put in a solitary room, but it had a closet. The kid went missing, and about 3 hours later they found him taking a nap at the bottom of the closet. They missed him the first time they checked there. Another time she had to teach him. This time the room did not have a closet or any other visible places he could hide. She left the room for something, probably to go to the bathroom, and when she got back, the kid was gone. The guard was there the whole time, and the room was basically sealed. There was no way he could have gotten out. Once again, there were also no places he could really hide. The school went on a lockdown while they tried to find this kid. About 2 hours pass, and they finally find the kid when he pushes away the paneling on the wall of the classroom and steps out to casually ask if he could go to the bathroom. This kid opened up the goddamn wall and climbed inside to hide, causing no one to be able to find him for hours. Hide and seek extreme. There was a girl that pretended to be a horse and make horse noises, and she also would draw pictures of all the guys' faces in detention with their bodies as half goat horse with very detailed massive male genitalia. She was a really good artist, lol. I'm betting she's a furry artist now raking in the money. Interestingly enough, this weird kid was actually really well liked by people at school. He was in the track team and was an insanely fast distance runner. We were pretty good friends in high school and we went to the same summer fine arts camp every year. The funniest thing he ever did was in geometry class freshman year. Our teacher was explaining planes to us and how because 3 points always form a plane, a 3-leg table will never wobble. Cue the weird kid standing up. Challenge accepted. Next Monday he comes in dragging a giant table into class. Over the weekend, he had built a table with 3 legs and springs between the flat tabletop and the legs so that if you put a glass on it, it would wobble and fall over. Our teacher found it so funny that he kept the table in his classroom for the whole year. A lot of effort to disprove a teacher's statement. I wish I had the motivation. In middle school there was this chick named Katie used to eat her panty strings in class. Like she would pull strings from the elastic part of them and eat it. A girl in my school would cut her hair and then eat it. She would eat other weird things in front of other people. It always grossed me out, but she seemed really nice. But also, the most popular girl put her spaghetti on the floor and then ate it to prove how Italian she was, lol. So IDK. Just as weird to me. There are 2 that come to my mind. It just so happens that they were also good friends with each other. The first one, I remember chasing girls around the school with his penis out. This was when we were pre-teens. The second guy joined our class when we were early teens, and the 2 became best friends. One time, the teacher said something to the line of the back table, out, because they were annoying her. These 2 sucker decided to open the window and throw the table out. Our malicious compliance. On prank day, 3 of the weirdest kids in my high school stripped down to their boxes and greased themselves up and ran around for about an hour while the principals tried to tackle them. A guy I knew in high school had a mouse living in his car. Not a pet mouse or anything, just a wild mouse. He would intentionally leave food in the backseat for it. I almost didn't believe it until I saw the thing run under the seat when he opened the door. He also wore this full cow suit to school one time, which freaked an autistic kid who had a specific fear of cows. There was a lot of debate if he wore it to freak the kid out or if he wore it just to be weird. He's a youth pastor now. Ran out of the class and I guess attempted to leave school or something. A bunch of teachers chased him. I could hear running out in the halls and teachers asking where he went. The door to the class was closed but there was a window. Quite a bit later I look up and I see him at the little window and he just looks at us and licks the window and runs away again, and I see a couple teachers run after. Same thing happened to a kid I knew in elementary. That one kid once went for a poop. He collected it in a bottle, put milk on it and went back into the classroom with his bottle of cocoa. He then proceeded to offer it to others and to the teacher. He is a senior physician now. Being weird did not harm him. He was just practicing collecting fecal samples for his future medical endeavors. He once had a tantrum and the teachers had to get all 29 kids out of the classroom to keep people safe from him. He also tried to give a guy that sat at the same table as me a wet willy in full view of the class and teacher. Adults who admittedly peaked in high school. What's life like for you now? 29 male. Until recently, high school was the peak of my life. In high school I was good looking, popular, athletic, and a decent student. My parents were rich and I had a BMW. I played varsity soccer all 4 years at a school of 2,500 kids and was recruited by Division I schools all over the country. College was a good experience as well until the very end when I realized I was not good enough to become a pro soccer player. I graduated with a communications degree because I had no idea what I wanted to do. Big mistake. After college I had a horrible time finding a job. I ended up working the front desk at the gym near my parents' house for 3 years. I would open the gym at 5 AM 5 days a week. A lot of the people that came in would be people I knew in high school. Sometimes they would act like they didn't know who I was in order to avoid an awkward situation, which just made it worse. There was a girl that I went to a dance with sophomore year that would come in every morning. My job is to greet anyone that walks in, so the first few times I would say hi name and she would swipe her card and completely ignore me. At a certain point my parents stopped helping me with money and I couldn't afford to fill my gas tank. I would ride my old bike from when I was a little kid to work. Sometime rain, snow, whatever. Then my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died within 4 months. He was very successful but not the greatest with money. To help my mom pay bills, I sold his car, his vacation home, and had her drop their country club membership. One day my uncle decided to take me to lunch to discuss my future. I'm actually tearing up about writing this part. He had a contact at a local tech company that had a few openings for customer service reps. I didn't even ask what it paid. I interviewed for it and was hired. It paid $25,000 and to me that was a ton of money. 5 years later I still work at that company and moved up to an engineering position after passing certifications. I have a beautiful wife and daughter, and we live in a nice little house. Very good. Strong work. Last year, at a wedding reception I ran into a guy who played basketball at our high school 10 years ago. He held the school record for most points scored in a game. Somewhere in the 30s. I don't remember. Anyway, a friend and I were talking with him next to the bar, and he says, "Man, I miss high school. It used to be every Friday night all these people would come, watch me play, and cheer me on. It was the best. I miss those days." So what are you up to now? Oh, just working at the car wash. My dad gave it to me. You should come by sometime. I'll give you a free wash. Business must be going good for you then. No, not really. That sucks. Yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, I'm go grab another drink. It was nice catching up with you guys. He leaves. Later on, another classmate of ours tells us that the guy just tipped the waitress with some car wash tokens and asked for her number. We mentioned our conversation about high school basketball. Oh yeah, he doesn't stop talking about that. Reflecting on that conversation, I remember when I was younger and one of the popular kids would pick on me. Adults told me not to be jealous of them because it wouldn't last. I hoped it to be true, but having experienced the moment 10 years later, I just feel sorry for the guy. It could be worse. He could be selling women's shoes. Alright, considering there are only 2 comments and nobody has actually posted a story yet, here is one about my uncle. In high school he was extremely popular. Football star and captain. Apparently he could get any girl and was a smooth talker. He got into drugs shortly after graduating. This is in the 70s and quickly flunked out of college. He continued his party lifestyle until it ran him into the ground. Now, he is pretty much mentally handicapped and can hardly have a conversation for more than 5 minutes. My whole family sees him as a burden and tries to ignore him as much as possible. It's sad because he is such a nice person and wants everyone to be happy. He got the idea that people don't want him around, so he lives alone and keeps to himself. I only ever see him at Christmas, so I always make it a point to include him and talk to him. I will call him on occasion and it always make his day. It's a sad, lonely life, but he never got the support or help he needed. I may have peaked in HS. Not quite sure. I was pretty freaking popular. Had a girlfriend always, but more importantly, people wanted to hang with me and be my friend. I always had plans. I always had a smattering of people to do something with and a variety of potential plans every weekend. Then came college. I went to a school I didn't really like, made some friends but never had a close-knit crew. Study abroad was the best semester I ever had, and I still keep in touch with many of those people, but don't see them as we're spread across the US now and getting older. I am 29. I have a great girlfriend. We will very likely get married and have been together a long while, so I don't get bummed over not being able to get girls, but prior to her, it was pretty rough and inconsistent after high school. But the real reason I feel I peaked is that I just don't have friends and can't make them. My girlfriend's friends from college are all great. We get along and like each other, but they never call me. I never call them. We converse but don't get close. But that is my most frequented social scene, I think. I have issues with work. 2 weeks unemployed right now. The bottom of my job essentially fell out, but that's for another thread. And even when I was working, it wasn't a job that provided me with much of a social outlet. I don't know that I've peaked. Certainly I have a lot going for me and I am happy, but I used to be popular, make and keep friends, have things to do, be invited places, and feel like people wanted to spend time with me. Therefore I would spend time with people. Now, despite having some friends, really great ones too, I just feel lonely and uncool, and excluded. I feel, and thanks to social media, know that the people who I do spend time with are often doing fun things and getting together and not even thinking of inviting or getting in touch with me, and I can't bring myself to pathetically invite myself along all the time. Is that what peaking is? I don't like to think you peak once in your lifetime. Life is a series of up and downs, so if you're reading this thinking you've peaked, you can always turn it around. My friend thinks she peaked in high school, but I'm still holding out hope for her. Yes, she was the top academically, athletically, socially, but what followed was a series of medical conditions, depression, feeling hopeless, losing interest and passion. Some days she feels better, some days she doesn't, and that's okay. I hope one day she can again feel like she is happy. There are many years left for your life. There are many years to find a new peak. And life is about the journey. Don't give up. Where's you motivating giraffe? The 50 Cent line. Dang homie, in high school you was the man, homie will forever haunt me. Other than that, you really just go from a shark in a koi pond to a minnow in the ocean. You can either dwell on the glory years or move the heck on with your life and make some new ones. Yep, it's a lot easier to be at the top of the mountain when you're stuck in a building with all your peers for 8 hours a day and you all live within a couple square miles of each other. Once high school ends and the world opens up, it's what you do with all that's in front of you that makes or breaks you. This sums up my dad and his sisters. High school was as good as it got and they spent all the years following it celebrating graduation day. Everything was about partying, drugs, music, drinking, fricking, and doing it all again. Now 2 of them are dead, both died at 51, and the sole survivor, my aunt, has a weird form of leukemia due to snorting dirty crank. Not sure what her life expectancy is, but she probably has a decade or so left of partying. When I talked to any of them, all they talked about was the glory days of high school and all the partying and fricked up crap they did. I always felt like it was sad and felt bad for them. It is hard to describe what a lifetime of partying, drinking, smoking, and doing drugs does to a person. They look totally worn out and dead inside. Sorry that you had to experience and witness that, man. My brother is immensely similar, and I can already understand the divergence happening between the two of us. I'm 30 years old and only now getting close to where I was in high school. I was a track star, school records, state championships, 11 varsity letters, and academic standout, voted most likely to get a perfect SAT score, entered college with 52 credit hours from AP classes. I also had a great group of friends and a couple of attractive girlfriends I went back and forth between. Senior year I developed a series of stress fractures that ended my track career. All the Ivy League schools that had been recruiting me stopped calling. I reacted by basically giving up on everything. I threw myself wholeheartedly into smoking pot all the time and skipping class. While I had the grades and reputation to coast for a while, I had completely used up all my momentum by the time I got to college. And college really sucked for me. By the time I got there, I was burnt out on anything resembling effort or success, and thought I could maintain the same reputation I had in high school by just sitting around my dorm room getting stoned waiting for my girlfriend to come visit on the weekends. I didn't make friends, didn't go to class, lost my GF and developed crippling anxiety and depression. From there I spent the next 5 or 6 years completely embracing mediocrity, dead-end jobs, way too much pot, no ambition whatsoever, yada yada yada. Self-loathing and the reality of a service industry lifestyle eventually lit a fire under my butt, went back to school, got a master's degree in applied mathematics, and now have a great job in finance. Things are definitely looking up for me, but I still have "Don't Give Up" again written on the top of my bulletin board. Most of the posts like yours have 2 things in common: heavy drug use, a lack of stern guidance from someone older and worthy of respect. It bums me out to think that there are all of these teachers and counselors walking around school and yet they can't pick up on the obvious signs of turmoil. Or they can, but they don't do anything about it. I had a friend who I played baseball with all through school until high school. He became a huge butthole. I was fairly popular and involved in different sports, so it was never towards me, but he was just a dong to everyone it seemed. Fast forward a few years, he had dropped out of college and came to a party I was throwing at my college. He ended up with a few other friends from our hometown. It's a large city around the keg, and started bawling about how his life sucked and he has no friends anymore because everyone's in college and nobody in our hometown likes him. I feel sad thinking about it, but then I still hear he acts the same way nearly 10 years after HS. Guy I knew had a 4.0 grade score through 4 years of high school, was given awards, certificates, the whole 9 yards. I was one of his connections for coke and weed and he would consume tremendous amounts. He went to university right out of HS and lasted 3 months before he completely burned out. The last time I saw him, he lived in a crap hole trailer on abandoned property in northern Ontario and drinks constantly. I guess I peaked in high school. Had a ton of friends. Popular. Great grades. Was on a varsity team. Dated my first girlfriend. My best friends are still the friends I made in high school. In college and afterwards. I never met anyone as cool or great as them. I'm kind of lost in life right now. I'm 24 and no idea what I want to do with my life. I miss my best friends. I miss having no responsibility. I miss Fridays after school where we would all pile into one car and take on the world and chase girls and play video games and do nothing. I miss all that so much. Peaked? Let me tell you something. I haven't even begun to peak. And when I do peak, you'll know. Because I'm gonna peak so hard that everybody in Philadelphia's gonna feel it. Idiots. This is probably going to get lost in the comments, but this isn't me. It's someone I know, and this very question just sends tingles up my spine and immediately made me think of him. He's a family friend, and he was an awesome all-rounded guy. Captain of the football team, president of the debate club, prom king, high school jock, valedictorian. Legitimately the perfect dude you could think of. Looks, money, brains, talent. Dude was made to practically make it big in his high school years. His superlative? Most likely to be successful. His teachers and principal all thought he was going to be a future president of the US. Unfortunately, he was into weed heavily. Graduated and went to a school for business. Got kicked out because of possession. That's not all, but he started doing hard drugs. Whatever he could get his hands on. From what I know, life went into the hardest spiral downward I've seen. Got into an accident driving drunk against a stone wall, totaled his car, and got a metal brace in place of his femur, I think. Currently, the dude is in rehab, mentally unstable to talk of anything significant with anyone, constantly ruins his dad's hard-earned reputation, and is treated like a 12-year-old. Blows the little money his parents have on getting the next high. Neighbors hate him, community hates him, and still is set on becoming the next president. He's 30 years old, still thinking he's going to run the world. No job, nothing to his name, no qualifications, yet he still thinks he runs the world. It's so sad to see. And that, street limp, is why you stay away from drugs. I'm sure most people who peaked in high school, edit, because there was a, here because I used a cell phone, still think they're the bee's knees. I can't really accurately describe how hopeless I feel knowing that my best years are behind me. All the anger and self-loathing knowing that I've had so many second chances, and I stepped on every one. The shame. The terror of looking forward from today, and seeing that it's all downhill. Thoughts of suicide are pretty common. I wouldn't call myself depressed, or serious about the notion, but just an occasional, is it really worth sticking around for another 50 years? I don't really know where to start with all of this, so I'll just dive right in. I hate my friends. At best, they are depressing and pathetic. At worst, they are bitter, angry, and hostile. My friends are all of the people from my hometown who found themselves in similar situations. For whatever reason, they didn't go to college, dropped out, or failed out. In other words, we are the losers. One of our favorite hangout spots is the apartment above my buddy's garage. He's renovating it so that he and his girlfriend don't have to live with his parents. It's funny how much of a stereotype it is, but it's not the kind of humor that makes you laugh. My old friends that went on to be successful outgrew me. One of them graduated college a year early, is going back for his masters, and opened his own business, which is doing very well. Watching him become successful was one of the hardest things I have ever done. He just kinda distanced himself from me until we don't really speak. I hate seeing him, because I can clearly see the pity in his eyes. I'll tell him something good that happened, and he'll say, "Hey man, that's great," and I know he means it, but it feels patronizing anyway. Pity isn't exclusive to him. Whenever I see anyone from high school, they all give me that look of pity. My old friends, my old teachers, all of the underclassmen that are going on to college and leaving me behind. It's really crappy knowing that the goofy looking freshman that you used to snicker at when you were a senior is doing better than you. The only ones that really get it are the other burnouts and losers. I hate that I'll never be able to experience crazy college parties. I hate feeling so caged. I hate watching all of my friends drive away while my wheels spin in the mud. I hate that I'll spend my life with these cynical, selfish, depressing bastards, and I hate even more that I'm turning into one of them. I hate that I'm so angry all the time. I hate that I'll have very few conversations about politics that don't involve racist slurs. I hate that drunk is the closest I get to happy. I hate that I'm turning into my loser father. I hate that I don't even know where to start changing any of these things. I hate that it's probably too late to try anyway. Jesus man, do something about this. I went to a private high school. All the douchy, popular kids ended up going to great universities on their parents' dime and got sweet jobs and hot wives. A lot of people have a bitter view at people who had a good time in high school. I think it's absolutely possible for high school to be some of the best times of your life under certain conditions. Doesn't mean you're a loser adult. I mean, my parents actually trusted me as a teen, so I didn't really gain any freedom when I hit adulthood. I had already been used to going out when I wanted. Relationships were easier. I kept summer jobs so I had tons of income I could blow on whatever with no bills to pay. Life will never be that easy again. And I'm not lost in life or anything. Got a wonderful girlfriend. We have our own place. Live in a town I love with a circle of great friends. Adulthood is fine. It's just that the teen years felt like easy mode, I guess. I can see where people are coming from if they had parents who had them on lockdown though. As a 33-year-old woman, may I say to you teenagers out there, for frick's sake stay away from the tanning bed. Two of the most beautiful girls I went to school with now appear to be beat up leather handbags. They are only in their early 30s kiddos. That crap will beat you up. Also smoking. You wanna tan and smoke and not look 20 years older than your contemporaries? Well, too fricking bad. Pretty frustrating at times. In school I represented my school in every sport and was in the top set for all my classes. Because I was respected for both my sporting and academic qualities, I got on with everyone and had a great time. Unfortunately, I moved away from my friends for college and university, and you actually had to put effort in to get those top grades. I realized this too late. Whilst I certainly didn't fail a dropout, I definitely fell short of my capabilities. After graduating, finding a decent job was difficult due to the region I was living in. Eventually stumbled into a good opportunity, but it required me to move to the other end of the country, away from family and friends. Decided to take the plunge, and I'm still working here 2 years on. Doing more hobbies than ever, networking and making connections. Made some great new friends, but still the new guy in my social groups. One of the most frustrating things is my position at work. I know I'm doing a good job and constantly taking on new responsibilities, but there's very little recognition due to the obscurity surrounding my specific role in the company. To compound this, I see colleagues around me who are inept at their jobs and yet earn a significant amount more, although I suppose this is something most people can relate with early in their professional career. I always joke to my friends that I peaked too early and in high school. Not to humble brag, but I was friends with kids in every year. Almost all my teachers loved me. I had a 4.0. One Mr. North, my HS name. Even in my yearbook I had to add an additional 6 pages because there wasn't enough space for people to write sign mine. I could literally pick and choose between the girls that wanted to date hook up with because there were enough that wanted me. Since then, I was an average student in college, had a decent amount of friends and settled into my first long-term relationship. After a few failed attempts, I joined a fraternity and no more sports. During college, I was diagnosed with bipolar, and that's something that I had to really learn to deal with. After graduation, got a decent job as a social worker, but I love it and I love what I do and I love my life. I definitely have fewer friends, but that was partially by choice. Growing older, I learned that it's literally impossible to have as many friends as I did in HS, and it's just too much effort and not worth it. I have fewer friends, but they are of better quality, and I'm glad that's how it is. It seems that life isn't as exciting, but I enjoy it just as much because there's a point where the Bruce Wayne homecoming king lifestyle suddenly stops becoming fulfilling. Yeah, it can bring temporary happiness, but I really had to take a look at my life as a whole and what I wanted to do with it. My life isn't terrible, but it's certainly fairly average compared to the HS celebrity status. To me it sounds like you're peaking now and that life is better than it ever was in high school. All these people complaining about how their 20s 30s have sucked, and I'm just sitting here, waiting to peak the first time. At my high school, you were popular if you were both smart and in sports. Most of the most popular guys are now off doing some pretty interesting things. One guy is a teacher in Thailand. Another guy has a master's from Cambridge in astronomy and is working on his PhD in physics at Harvard. My school was a little different, I guess. Oh man, I wish I could go back in time. I'd take state. Back in 1982, I used to be able to throw a pigskin a quarter mile. Private school in Germany, most of the popular kids went into economics. One of them keeps making startups and selling them. High school in rural Florida, one of them just finished some kinda dental school type undergrad. Happy for her. Most of the popular girls went on to become mums primarily. Even the smart but slightly awkward one got her degree and then became a full-time mother. At 6th form in England, one guy keeps going on trains without tickets and getting caught. He's also some sort of EDL type now. One girl graduated from uni a few days ago and is hosting entrepreneurship workshops. One is doing psychology at the same university I went to. I'm not too far away from high school yet, but I am technically an adult, and being a teenager was the most fun I ever had. Life was simple and nice. The people around me were really cool. I got introduced to social drinking. The times were wild. Had my first serious girlfriend. Felt love for the first time. I had more friends and more acquaintances. Now I'm in my last year of an aggravating college. It's ranked pretty high, but the teachers are old and very incapable. I came here with great passion for electronics, but all I did was lose in the long run. I lost my girlfriend. My family is quite far away. All my friends have disappeared. I live in a pretty nasty dorm, but there are upsides, I guess. I started my first job and it's well paid. I can finally pay for everything myself, without help from my parents. But that's about it. I miss the nice people from my hometown. I miss things being simple and quiet. Was popular all through high school. I partied a lot, drank drugs as often as possible. I had a girlfriend every month. To maintain my popularity, I focused all my time on my appearance and hanging out with people daily. My grades suffered, but whatever, I was cool. I ended up having a kid when I was a senior. Grades were too bad to go to college. Had a drug problem, and no one wanted anything to do with me. Oh, plus I was a dishwasher at Denny's. I didn't realize the moment you graduate, nobody cares about high school. Luckily now I have a good job and I'm engaged with 2 kids. It's epic. At school I got straight A's, was in the first 15, athletics captain, was on the debate team, the chess team, the bridge team, house captain, prefect, got some girls, got some guys, staff loved me, dinner ladies loved me, extra sticky toffee pudding, other students loved me, some of them it was great, Then I went to university and was no longer the smartest kid there. I was no longer the best at everything. And the more I tried to be, the more I realized you can't be a jack of all trades. Then I got a job and realized you need to work really hard to be the best. And I still wanted hobbies and interests and to date and go out. And that's not compatible with being the best at your job. Then I realized, boom, you don't need to be the best at everything. You don't even need to be the best at one thing. The world doesn't care. And more importantly, your friends and family don't care. So now I'm coasting thanks to my previous good results, earning a good wage, with a beautiful woman at my side. Maybe I'll make a go of something and be the best again. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll divorce at 40. Maybe I'll dance the funky chicken at my 75th wedding anniversary. At high school I was the best. Now, I'm just pretty good, and that's okay. In fact, it's epic. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.